We're good, we're good. What's up, guys? How's it going? Hope you're having a fantastic morning, evening, afternoon, wherever you're coming from. And I bring with you a handsome cast of guests here for a no doubt spicy discussion that's about to ensue. So we're going to get right into it for the Great Smurf Debate, where we'll be talking about smurfing, unranked GMs, competitive, ego, mindsets needed for climbing, and just the general competitive mode of Overwatch, because I have with me three coaches of all different backgrounds. So let me introduce them. Starting in the bottom right, my man, long-time collaborator, but first time on the podcast, former coach of the London Spitfire, it is Spilo. Spilo, what's going, man?
Go on. Appreciate you having me.
Great to have you on. People have been begging me to get you on for a while, so I'm glad we could finally make it happen.
Appreciate it.
In the bottom left, we have frequent rank 1 support and frequently handsome fellow, Awkward. Awkward, what's up?
I'm doing good. Thank you for having me, Vivi. Appreciate it.
Awesome. And in the top left, another coach, the man who wrote the manifesto on goats. We have ioStux. ioStux, what's up, man?
Yes, my finest work. I'm really happy to be here.
Great, awesome. I'm happy to have all you guys here. I won't say I'm just changing a title I realize I effed up on. But yeah, I mean, there's been some, the inspiration for this podcast came from Awkward in the bottom left here, who's been dropping some interesting takes on Twitter. So I saw ioStux disagreeing, and I was like, you know what, this would make a great discussion point, because two people whose opinions I really respect are having a disagreement, and that's not a place for Twitter to be. That's a place for some conversation to come in. So that's where we're going to come in. I'm going to read out Awkward's tweet that sparked this whole thing, and we've got a couple other takes as well. And then I'm going to have Awkward kind of discuss and elaborate on that stance, and then we'll go from there. So the tweet that started this all, the tweet that launched 1,000 ships and 1,000 replies in my Twitter mentions. Awkward says, wait, not this one. Let's start with this one. The average player will complain when there's a Smurf on the enemy team, while a great player will be excited to play against someone who is better. Challenges are a necessity for learning and self-improvement. Accept them and climb the ladder, or complain and stay in plat. So, Awkward, what do you think? Expand on that and kind of give us your thoughts behind that original tweet.
Well, okay. I believe that in order to be better at anything, you have to face challenges. You have to play against better players at whatever you're trying to do. If you were swimming, you'd like to practice harder drills to get better. If you're playing video games, you'd like to play against players that are higher ranked than you. If you're boxing, you would like to face people in the ring that are better than you so you can learn. That's what sparring is for. Now, a lot of people complain as why they lose is because of Smurfs. And I argue that you can learn a lot about players that you play against. You might get shit stomped, sure, but there's a lot that you can learn from it. That's the main point. Now, this can go a lot of ways where I can speak for hours about this, but if you'd like me to argue a point, you have to be specific on what it is that you disagree.
Okay, so there's our initial setup that, you know, okay, you got to spar against someone who's better than you to learn. That's how improvement comes. Now, yeah, ioStux out there in the top left was disagreeing in the Twitter quote retweets and the reply. So ioStux, what kind of did you disagree with fundamentally on this take?
So, first of all, I 100% agree that if you want to get better, you have to challenge yourself, right? The perspective that I'm taking, I'm kind of trying to find like the other side to things, is that for some people, right, they're not necessarily complaining that like if someone is saying, oh, the reason why I'm in platinum and I can't climb the Smurfs, that's obviously not true, right? But if someone is saying, oh, the reason I am not having as much fun is because I'm playing against a Smurf, I think that's like a very valid opinion to have, to be able to say, I just don't enjoy getting stomped on by a Smurf. And to kind of accept that maybe some people who play ranked, they, you know, kind of want to balance improving on one side, but also just having fun at the game, right? And of course, I mean, for me personally, when I played the game and I got a chance to play against a high-level player or a Smurf, I cherish that. I really like that. But for example, recently with Overwatch 2, I've started playing with my friends again. And sometimes, you know, the number one complaint that they have is that sometimes it just feels like there's one person on the other team who goes like, you know, 50-3, and it just doesn't feel as much fun. And, you know, of course I can tell them, well, you can try to learn from it, but that doesn't really change the fact that they, you know, they're just going to end up closing the game and then play League of Legends or something.
Okay, I'm gonna let Awkward respond. I will let Spilo handsomely listen and take in, and then come in with a profound take in a moment. But Awkward, kind of go ahead and riff off what ioStux said there.
Okay, that's a very fair point. You know, the fun aspect. If you want to have fun, in my opinion, you shouldn't queue up to competitive mode. You should play Unranked, Mystery Heroes. You have a bunch of other games that you play. When you queue up into competitive mode, you have to understand that people want to win, and therefore they also want to improve, right? That is the reason why people don't enjoy when people are throwing, because inherently the game is just boring that way, and nobody improves. Nobody has fun, because it's just a waste of time, of everybody's time. Now, if you'd like to improve at the game, you actually have to try your best to win and try to learn from it. So I don't exactly see a competitive setting as fun, because when I step in the ring, I don't also enjoy having having punches thrown in my face, right? It's not very fun, but it's a very good learning experience. And what I don't enjoy particularly is let's say sparring against someone significantly worse than me, because there's nothing that I can learn from it. And you might say it might, boost my self-esteem and ego, but that's not why you should do any competitive, let's say, sports or any competitive modes in any video games if you just like to play against people that are lower than you. It just makes no sense to me. Just through my experience, everything I've done in my life or in video games, just to be better. My ego is not stroked by farming some golds, for example.
Okay, very interesting. I have something I want to riff on, but I'm going to let Spilo chime in first. So Spilo, anything said by Awkward or ioStux there, which is, I think it's a very interesting philosophical idea there, that what Awkward's getting at, which is like, well, look, that's not what the comp mode is for. I'm here to kind of try hard and challenge and go the hardest I can, and that's the implicit contract you sign when you're playing competitive.
Sure. So I have two things. I think one is, I think you have to be really careful about when we describe something as competitive, that the only thing that we're trying to do is to win. I think even Awkward saying is like we're trying to improve or trying to get better. But I think the idea is that competitive ventures should still be fun. Win at all costs or playing to win is what's fun for a lot of people. For example, if I'm competing in a pickup basketball game, if nobody's trying and we're just screwing around, people aren't going to have fun, right? Maybe it's fun for some people, but I'm the type of guy like Awkward who I want to compete to win, right? That being said, there's a really important aspect. I brought my receipts here. So there's a really important study we have here. This was done in 1908, and it talks about the Yerkes-Dodson law. And what the Yerkes-Dodson law talks about is the challenge skill balance. And what that means is when we're trying to enter flow state, which is the optimal state for learning, for having fun, for improving, there has to be a very careful line between where we have, this is where my current skill is, and this is where the challenge is. So it's above where my current skill set is. So like Awkward and ioStux said, for us to actually improve, if we play at the same skill level, it's actually really hard to get better. Or like Awkward said, if you're beating up on gold players, it's almost impossible to get better, right? I've done this many times when we were scrimmaging a tier 2 team, for example, like London Spitfire, we get a cancellation, we got to scrimmage a contenders team. The hardest thing that you can do as a coach is keep the players focused and trying to get something out of that scrimmage. Sometimes it's better to just do nothing. But then the opposite is true as well, where when you break that line, when the flow goes from the challenge is beyond my current skill set significantly, and obviously what's significantly, right? Is it a plat player in a gold lobby? Is it a diamond player in a gold lobby? It's a really it's a spectrum, right? But when it gets to be too significant, it gets to be so overwhelming that we know it's no longer a learning process. Now, my stance on the unranked GM thing is that I think people playing in the unranked GM lobby don't get anything out of it, depending on the rank. If it's a GM in a Masters lobby, there's something that you can learn from that beyond just mechanics, certainly. But if we have GM plat lobby, there's just simply too much. I think Awkward is in an interesting position because he and a couple other the unranked GMs I've seen, I think A10 is another one, who does a really good job for when you're in the stream. He does an excellent job elaborating exactly what he's doing. So it's not just I'm beating up on, plat, diamond, whatever players. I'm repeating concepts over and over and over again that if you're watching the stream, I can then go translate and practice in my games. Awkward's always talking about the damage Ana, the damage support mindset, right? that's a really good thing to practice, right? Now, we're not going to have his level of mechanics, but even a plat player should be practicing that mentality. Same thing with A10. When A10 goes in and dominates people in Orisa, yes, it's frustrating for the people in the lobby, and maybe there's not a whole lot to take for them because it's way above their skill level. However, if you're in his stream or watching the YouTube video, what's he talking about? He's talking about positioning, cover. Look at this, guys. I'm winning this fight from cover. So I see the benefit from it, from if you're watching it, because what's being said, what's being coached, because Awkward and A10 aren't just players, they're also coaches as well. And they do a good job explaining what they're doing as they're doing and making it applicable for the average player. That being said, when I'm in a lobby with Awkward and he's 2-3 ranks above me, the return on investment there just isn't there. It's simply above your skill level. And there's too many things, too many factors. And this isn't even considering the fun factor. Even if you're looking to improve, generally there's too many things going on for you in the moment to be able to learn from that process. You're probably going to get overwhelmed, dominated, and make the experience a negative thing rather than a positive thing.
Interesting. Lots of thoughts there, very eloquently put, backed up with a 1900 study from Spilo as well. So appreciate the homework being done. The coaches doing their homework. There you go, guys. Inspirational leaders. So Awkward, there's quite a few strands for there to potentially respond of. Obviously, the undercurrent to all this, for anyone who's maybe lacking context, Awkward has done many fantastic unranked GMs, and they are sometimes the source of complaint and ire amongst the community, but also clearly very popular content, very informative content, I would say. So is anything in particular you want to respond to what has been said by Spilo?
Well, there's a very good point that he's making, that the learning curve from players with a big disparity in skill level is really hard to learn. Like a gold will not necessarily be able to learn a lot from a GM player, like facing him, right? My educational content are for people that are watching rather than people that are in the game itself. But I do not believe that I genuinely ruin their entire game experience by being in one game and destroying them. Also, you could argue the point that even though you don't learn a lot, you can still learn something. Okay, so why did the Zen kill me? He flanked me. Okay, did I not hear him? Maybe my awareness just sucks. Maybe my headphones are broken. You can learn something. You can point a finger at least on one thing. Maybe it's a different 50 things. Sure, I'll agree on that. But a gold player can point on one thing. Why did I fuck up here? And he can fix that. Doesn't have to be 500 points. Now, also, I want to drift to another point, the previous point, where a lot of people in the comments were saying something like, what am I gonna learn from a GM widow shooting me in the head? It's like getting in the ring with Mike Tyson. Would you do it? Well, the first thing, I risk injury and possibly death when I get in a ring with Mike Tyson.
Yeah.
Sure. But anyone who's slightly competitive, if he had the chance to spar with Mike Tyson with no risk of injury, every single person who is slightly competitive with an innate just wants to win or something, like wants to improve, he will take that chance. It's not something that is given to you, it's something that is earned. But a lot of people would take that opportunity, including myself. I would get in a ring with Mike Tyson if I didn't risk getting my head smoked against the canvas and literally just go to the hospital later. But if he's just sparring, sure, no problem. Even if he's significantly better than me.
Mm-hmm.
Can I
yeah, go ahead,
that?
Yeah, go for it.
Okay. So I think it's a good analogy, right? So the idea of getting into a ring with Mike Tyson, and you said that you risk getting injured there, so the analogy isn't really applicable. But I think you have a very good mindset for yourself, right? That's helped you improve. That's gotten you to where you are. But what I do, what Spilo does, right? We talk to these metal ranked players. We kind of, it's part of our job to understand how they think. And of course, if you do an unranked to GM and you play against them, you stomping on them isn't going to physically hurt them, right? But the reality is that not everyone has kind of adopted that mindset that you have. And I have, by far the number one biggest kind of mindset related issues that people have is just, when they get stomped on by a Smurf, it just crushes their self-esteem. It's not fun. It just kind of makes them want to quit for the game. And the problem that I have is that ultimately, I don't think anyone should feel entitled to the privilege of being able to stomp on others. So of course, if someone wants to play against a Smurf, I would I'm gonna be honest, I would love to. If I want to just grind out ranked, you know, honestly, if I had the money, I would pay people to just scrim with me and just stomp me all day. But the reality is that a lot of people don't want that. And when someone goes into on a Smurf account and they play in low elo, they didn't ask those players if they were okay with that, right? Because if we say that the reason we do Unranked 2 GM is because it's great educational content and because it's a learning opportunity for the people that we play with, why not just, you know, create a custom game lobby and invite some stream viewers, you know, because then, you know, those people want to get the experience to play against a really high level player. And, you know, you play against players of a lower skill level and you can kind of showcase, because that's something that I also think is very valuable. You playing in a top 500 lobby is very different from you playing in a low elo lobby, because in a low elo lobby, you can specifically explain, hey, these are the mistakes that these metal rank players do that I'm abusing. This is what you can do in your games as well, right? So the main issue that I have isn't the idea of stomping on worse players for the sake of education. I just think it's important that those players should have a say in whether they're okay with that, whether they want, you know, to use their time that way. Because of course, some people really appreciate the opportunity, and those people should be brought into a custom game lobby, and, you know, you can use them to kind of showcase those points. I just think that if I had a long work day, I want to queue for ranked. I just want, you know, the reason ranked was created in the first place in games is just to create balanced matches, right? I should be able to just queue for the game and feel like I have a very close game, because I think you agree here. The best Overwatch experience by far is when you have a super close nail biter game. Like, there's no huge diffs on either team. It's just super close, right down to the wire. That's, I think, what Overwatch is all about. And when you go into a game and within 2 minutes, you kind of know, okay, sure, I could learn a thing or two from this, but I kind of know that I'm just wasting my time here. This is not going to be a win. I can't improve, you know, enough to beat this Smurf within the next 5 minutes. I think that's just, you know, also perspective worth considering.
Yeah, I think it's a very good perspective. I'm actually going to chime in here, rather than make it a cast versus awkward debate. I actually have two points that I think would potentially work in favor of awkward's argument here. One is this idea of like, what is comp? Because I think we've kind of alluded to two different ideas here. At the start, ioStux was like, actually awkward, you were like, well, you play comp because it's like you agree to try as hard as you can and win. You're here to learn and win. And then ioStux kind of alluded to, well, I came for balanced matches. That's what I came for. I actually am going to throw in an Agent of Chaos point, which is like, there is no implicit contract when you sign up for comp. There's nothing that when you click the competitive mode, there's nothing that it says this is what it is. Some people treat comp like quick play plus. Some people are like, I don't care. I'm just playing. I don't really care that much more about winning. Some people play it like awkward, where they're like, I will try super hard. I'm going to, you know, calm my brains out like it's Overwatch League. If you watch Samido play, he's like calms like it's an Overwatch League grand final every single time. And, you know, other people are like, well, I feel like one-tricking Zenyatta today. I'm going to one-trick Zenyatta today. Some other guy's like, well, you know, I heard this guy's good now, so I've never played 2 minutes of Wrecking Ball, but I'm going to try playing Wrecking Ball today. And I think that you could use that argument to say that for the same reason, there's no like baseline that you can all agree, and therefore it is within the grounds for someone to come in and say, well, I'm here to do what I want to do, which is make this unranked to GM content. As long as it's, I guess the technicality would be not breaking the terms of service, right? Because that's where some people say, well, if you're, let's say, the bronze smurfing, the bronze to GM version of this would be against terms of service, right? It would be you're manipulating your SR to buy an account that shouldn't be where it is. But if you have a fresh account, the argument could quite easily be made, well, it's not my fault that Blizzard put me in a gold lobby to start with. I'm simply playing on this fresh account. And as I go, I'm demonstrating an educational form of content. And again, this is not breaking the implicit contract of comp, which is it's different things to different people. And for me, it's a chance for educational content. So I'm going to let that idea float in the air for a second before the other idea that I kind of want to respond to. So if any of you have anything you want to riff off, go for it.
It's law versus ethics.
Mm-hmm.
That's the way I look at it anyway. And it's to be very clear, it's not like I'm not even necessarily implying that it's super black and white. Here's a good question for you, Awkward. So you made a tweet which I really thought was great, which is like making fun of an overweight person who are generally or making fun of an overweight person in the gym as opposed to making fun of a lower rated player who's genuinely trying to improve. Right? I think that's something that everybody can agree on. But to me, I think the unranked GM is like the equivalent of going up to somebody randomly in the street overweight, yelling, "You're overweight," and walking away. Is that maybe advice that they maybe need to hear? Maybe that if they want or in a position to hear, maybe it like clicks and then they do something productive with it? Yes. But more often than not, you're just going to tick somebody off. And to me, that's where it's like you talk about it's just one game. Most of the players you can be playing against, you play once and then you're done. But it's like it's the ethics of going up to a random stranger and slapping them in the face, saying you're overweight, and then walking away. You know, how much do we really get out of that? What are the chances of the odds of somebody that is actively looking, oh, sick, I got a Smurf. Hey, look at that. Just my luck. I got a Smurf that I can learn from, versus the odds that that person is somebody who's just playing for fun or even playing to improve and goes, what is this? You know, I mean, how many times have we like had games or had complaints from people in our chat or people that we're trying to coach? How do I deal with Smurfs? You know, what do I do in a Smurf game? And there just isn't a lot you can learn from them, but people really get frustrated at that. And I think when it comes to finding an overall quality game experience, it can be very helpful for somebody who's looking for that. But somebody who's not looking for that, I don't see it. It doesn't provide as much value as it could, I guess.
Or could you have something to respond? Because I have a
yeah,
response.
yeah. I said that. Well, the first thing that you said, like, it's like walking to an overweight person, calling them overweight.
Can I actually just to interject? Can we change the metaphor? Just let's just say someone is out of shape. Okay, instead of just saying overweight, let's just say someone is out of shape.
Fair enough. You get someone who is out of shape, and you go and say that if it takes him off, well, probably because he's not really happy with himself. From my experience, everything that I've done great is because people were quote unquote bullying me a little bit. I think that it's kind of necessary to be slightly bullied about certain topics in order to change them. Because if somebody says, hey, well, you're weak, you can't fight, well, if it takes me off, well, I might as well just go to the martial arts gym and learn how to fight, right? Or if I'm out of shape and people laugh at me, right, and I feel uncomfortable, people laughing at me, I think the best change you can make is actually hit the gym. Sure, maybe they're saying it harshly, but it's the truth at the end of the day. It doesn't matter how you say it. It's pretty black and white. It's either truth or false. Or either you are out of shape or you're in shape. And it doesn't matter if people are mean about it. Sure, the life is mean. Nobody said that somebody with like a fairy with some rainbow is gonna say, hey, you might as well hit the gym. You'll be stronger. No, people will talk shit about you. And if it ticks you off, maybe it's time for self-reflection and go for it. Like make a change about it.
Okay, this analogy hits close to home, so I quickly want to address this.
Mm-hmm.
So when I first joined Uprising Academy, I actually weighed 243 pounds, and over the course of a year, I went down to 180. And that's not because I suddenly realized like, oh, being overweight is not as cool as I thought it was. It's that a lot of people kind of tried to give me advice, on like what I can do. And they gave me like these diets where I need to shift my entire diet around. Some people like took me to the gym or like they took me running, and they were running at like a super fast pace. And it was just like too much for me, right? Like it was completely overwhelming. I couldn't stick to the diet. I couldn't do anything, right? And I think it's kind of the same thing here, where only once I started kind of adding small lifestyle changes, like substituting, this type of food with a different type of food, right? Just small changes and kind of easing into it, that really helped me mentally with that change. And I think it's the same in Overwatch, where like, if one of my friends was overweight, for example, I wouldn't just put them on keto from one day to the next. I would tell them, well, you can try using like a smaller bowl for breakfast, like kind of a small start, and then you keep progressing and you keep progressing. And I think that with Unranked to GM and kind of playing against a Smurf, that is like such a dramatic skill disparity that sure, some person are going to experience that, and they're going to say, wow, that really put into perspective how much more I can improve. Like, that person is so good. He just single-handedly carried the game. But I'd argue that there's a lot more people who experience that, and, they're discouraged by it. And they say, wow, okay, I knew that I wasn't amazing at the game, but apparently I'm really bad. Like, do I even want to bother anymore? Right?
There's a simple solution. Don't bother. Just don't bother. It's like what you're describing is like, okay, they feel overwhelmed and they can't handle the heat and whatever. They can't learn. They just give up. It's like saying, okay, I want to be rich. Let me start my business. I start my business, it fails. Okay, give up. Let's go back to, minimum wage. Not going to be rich anymore. Well, don't be rich. It's your problem, It's just you have a weak mentality. That's all I'm saying.
Right.
If
No,
you-
I'm of course. So I agree that, it's not the best mentality to have. But from my experience, some people, like me personally, I managed to reach, my personal fitness goal, one step at a time. That approach just suited me better. I didn't have that mental fortitude, right? And I think there's so many players out there who also think that, or that approach also suits them better, right? I'm saying that some people, just getting smacked in the face, with reality is the best approach for them. But I'm saying that some people, they just improve faster when they have that balance of like, having a fun motivational experience while also being challenged, having those nail biter games and just improving one step at a time.
I have two things to chime in with here. I kind of want to one for and one against awkward, so it balances out nicely. One, I think initially you said awkward, like, well, it's black and white. You're either out of shape or you're not. I actually think that's a stance I would disagree with, because I think that's your perspective on that person. Let's say if we go back to the Overwatch, because we're kind of drifting a little bit from the topic here, but let's say we're talking about Overwatch and you're looking at someone who's gold, and in your POV it's very obvious like that person's either good and improving or bad and stagnating. But from that person's perspective, they might be exactly where they want to be. They might be that actually gold is where they strive to be for ages. Like they were bronze for ages, and gold is success, and gold is a rank they're happy being. They don't feel the need to improve. Even though, again, I understand you will say, well, why you sign up for comp then? Why did you play comp? If you didn't want to improve, why are you playing comp and gold? But for them, they're like, I enjoyed climbing from bronze to gold. Here I am, and I'm happy with this state, and I'm happy to play in gold. So I think for them, that's like you're almost putting your ideology on that person and expecting them to kind of match that. But on the flip side, I would argue that the analogy wasn't quite accurate in the sense that if you were doing an unranked GM, you're not necessarily slapping that person in the face of like, you're out of shape. You're kind of existing in a peak form, and potentially, yes, you're competing against them, and then you're kind of moving on. Unless you sit there and voice chat to be like, you're dog, kid, I rolled you in gold, get fucked. Like that's obviously the rubbing it in their face. But I think it's more of like there's a competition, it's open. One guy comes in, he's clearly way better, dominates everyone and leaves without necessarily saying anything. And at that situation, we might argue it's unethical, but is the feelings of the other people in the lobby something that the unranked GM, or let's say awkward, should have to worry about? Is that their problem, considering everyone else does all kinds of BS in their ranked games anyways, that other people may disagree with?
How's the content? I think it's the ethics of how many people that also benefit from watching an awkward's unranked GM versus the people that may have their games messed up.
That was going to be my other point, yeah.
A lot of unranked GMs I think are done as just like casual flex modes, won't name any names, but I think some of the GMs, awkward's is definitely one of them, where it's like, if you watch awkward's unranked GM, there's a lot of people that are going to learn a lot from that. So, like I said, it's definitely not black and white for me.
Right. I just think, of course, it's like educational content, but the main issue, like 100%, is just that ultimately it is at the expense of other people. And ultimately, if awkward wouldn't be hurt by the fact that, he was playing with a Smurf, that doesn't mean that other people can't disagree, right? There's like a lot of people, they play with a Smurf, they just don't enjoy that. And so there used to be a time where I played like a lot of Valorant, and there's this content creator, Eggwig, and he makes these videos where, he has like a full iron lobby, and he puts like one high level player, and then if he wins, he goes up and, takes people from chat who are silver and then gold. So I think that like this entire situation can just be avoided by, finding people who voluntarily want to get smurfed on by you, which I personally don't think is that difficult to organize, rather than just forcing random people in ranked to, get shit on, to put it bluntly.
I would actually disagree with that before I give awkward, because awkward's cooking, I see it. I actually disagree with that, because I think because I've seen this happen a lot where people want to see, the reason unranked GMs are popular, I think, is that people want to see, when people play in a game, let's say they're like gold and they play in a very like mismatched lobby or just a very wild game, they sit there and they're like, dude, there's nothing I could have done to win that game. I defy someone else to come in my position and win that game on instead of me. And you see, I think that is truly what the Unranked GM provides. It isn't like, we know Awkward could beat up on a bunch of gold. Like, that's obviously not for debate. Any GM player should, in theory, be able to beat up a bunch of volunteers in a gold lobby. That's not what people watch the Unranked GM for, I think. I think people watch the Unranked GM because they want to see, how would you have navigated the wildness of my rank game? Not a bunch of volunteers who care enough to come with you and care enough to sign up and play in this game. I want you to play with the absolute shitters that I get in my game and still win that game. So I actually disagree. I think if he did that, plus people would be like, oh, you rigged it. There's so many ways people can undermine a volunteer organized like Smurf exercise compared to, I made an account, I played in your games and I fucked them. That's how you do it. So I'm gonna let Awkward chime in as well. Okay,
yes.
Just go
just
ahead.
one. Sorry, just one sentence. Then I'll let you speak. Just one sentence. Yes, but then now the question is Unranked to GM educational, or is it trying to prove that people can climb out of low elo? Right.
It can be both, I think. But yeah, Awkward.
I'm sorry. I'm gonna let Awkward talk.
No.
Super sorry.
Yeah, I think you're very correct, SVP. I think that's exactly my thoughts. People want authenticity. People always say, I have shitters on my team. My tank is feeding. My other support is throwing. You wouldn't win my games. That's why I originally started, to prove. It doesn't matter what team you give me, I'll win. It doesn't matter who I play against, cheaters, Smurfs, I'll win. Well, granted, I am better, but I'm going to show you what steps you can do, even though you're lower ranked than me, you don't have the same mechanics. A step-by-step solution where you could be better. Now, in terms of organizing, it might not be complicated, but people might be nervous. People might be trying harder. Nobody is going to be throwing. So it's not very authentic as to the experience of players in comp or ladder, where they claim they have Smurfs all the time and people are throwing every game. And everything bad happens only to them.
Yeah.
No. Okay. That I think that's a good point. Yes. No. I do. Yeah. I think that's a fair point.
Mm-hmm. I think the other, and obviously this is tied very deeply with philosophy, and I know Spilo, if you got anything to chime in, by the way.
No, I don't think anything else to add.
Because you've been kind of, you've been stewing on the philosophy as well. Is like, sorry, go ahead, ioStux.
No, sorry. Yeah, no, I just remembered one thing I wanted to respond to that. So you said that one of the main advantages of Unranked to GM is its authenticity, because it kind of just definitively proves to people that it is possible. I kind of have two counter arguments. The first one is, and this might sound a little brutal, but from my experience, people who cope are going to keep coping. Like I've actually watched quite a few of your Unranked 2 GMs. And even then, like, people in the comments are like, oh, his enemies are just like stupid, or he always gets like the good teammates, like, oh wow, his DPS players actually kill stuff, mine never do. So I do think that, some people who cope are always going to find a reason to cope. And I forgot the second part. But
for that, I say they can stay in gold. That's exactly
yes,
what
I agree.
Stay in gold.
They can stay in gold. Yes.
The content that I'm making are for people that are interested in improving, not people that are coping. For me, it doesn't matter what they don't like. It's just simple. You cope, stay in gold, don't care.
Right.
Person that is listening, want to improve, listen, implement, improve.
Right. So that's the thing. And then also, like, if it's supposed to kind of prove that you can climb out of low elo, I feel like at a certain point, there's just enough Unranked 2 GMs out to kind of prove the point. Like, if a friend of mine says he's hard stuck, I'm not going to send him a list of 52 different Unranked 2 GMs. By the third one, he's probably understood what's going on. So that's also, I just personally dislike the argument that Unranked 2 GM's main purpose is to, prove to copers that, they are the reason they're hard stuck, and like a good player like Awkward can just, climb out of there super easily.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, it depends on who's making them. It's like there are many teachers. Not everyone likes this specific type of teacher. He likes that guy. So if I get a lot of positive feedback on one Ranked 2 GM, well, I'll make more, because people like the way that I talk about the game, the way that I teach. So they're more inclined to watch the stuff that I do. I mean, that's why I agree that not a lot of need to exist. And most actually are not even educational. It's some guy just smurfing saying, I killed this widow. Well, because I'm good. Well, and she sucks. Oh, great. But how?
Right. And here's the spice. there's a little bit of conflict of interest because especially people that spam them over and over again and are not as good educators as, say, Awkward, you get a lot of views.
Well, this
So-
is a point I was going to bring up, which is Awkward. Did you want to chime in first?
I said that, yes, the whole thing of me doing it just to smurf on low elo players, I could have just done in regular ranked 2 GM and just shit on every lower rank without explaining anything, and I would have even gotten double the views. Nobody cares about educational. People like to see the, the drama, the shitting on lower elo players. That's what people like to see, right? I made mine educational with a purpose. The reason I want to teach players, right? I always been complaining on my rank letter. I always said, the people here in high elo top 500, they're pretty shit at the game, even though they're like objectively good. They're pretty not good. So be the change you want to see in the world. I'd like to teach people, a GM player, to be in a top 500 level, that with the level of competency, I'll be happy to have him on my team. Now, these are the players that I make it for, not the people who are like, my team sucks, and you just shit on them because you're GM. Well, no shit that I can shit on them on GM, but how do you think I got to GM, dummy? By implementing what the advice I give you.
Yeah, I think it's very important. There's a couple of strands that we could still take. It shows you how fascinating discussion is. Now that the view subject has been broached, I think we can go there as well, because again, in that philosophical vein, it's that almost, it reminds me of the trolley cart of like, you have the choice that this trolley cart is going to run over 3 people. Would you pull the lever and it runs over 2 people? Where, I think someone mentioned earlier, well, okay, some games are being ruined by Awkward. Well, but how many more people is he educating with his content? Like, so does the good of the many outweigh the good of the few? But on top of that, it's the idea that if unranked GMs are so unethical, if the community so clearly considers them to be unethical, why are they far and away the most consistent, reliable content to make for a content creator that gets views? Which you might argue the silent vote is of the people who like watching them. And there may be the vocal minority who complain a lot that Smurfs are ruining my games, Smurfs are why I'm hard stuck, or Smurfs are just ruining my fun. Even if they don't think it's why they're hard stuck, all Smurfs are ruining my fun. Well, the silent majority is voting with their clicks, and they continue to watch unranked GMs over and over and over. And as a content creator who is a person who must look after their money and feed themselves, why would you not, if you had the competency and ability to make an unranked GM, get hundreds of thousands of views and feed yourself for that month, So I think there's that aspect to it as well. I'm curious if any of you have any thoughts on that.
So you're right. And I think that's like a very pragmatic way to look at it. But ultimately, to me, like the main reason why I responded to that is because I think the number one argument that just cannot be denied is that every single game you play in an unranked 2 GM is just a miserable experience for at least the 5 people on the other team, and more often than not, the 4 people on your team as well, right? Like maybe they'll enjoy it, maybe they don't. It kind of depends, right?
Well,
but, at least 5 people are going to go out of that game just feeling kind of like garbage. And for me personally, I just don't feel good knowing that I've just wasted those, their time. Even if one could say, oh, well, they had it coming because they have a garbage mindset. If they just had a good mindset, then they would have appreciated that opportunity. But I don't think that matters, because every single person should have the right to say what hurts them and what they dislike, right? And even if their mindset isn't great and it's a little plebby to say, oh, I don't like playing, like, of course, it would be better if they said, oh, great learning opportunity. But aside from the argument that as the skill gap, what Spilo said earlier with the flow state, I know that everyone's eyes just lit up when he said flow state. It's like such an amazing buzzword. But, it is just scientifically proven that at a certain skill disparity level, education from an educational perspective just stops being as valuable. And I think just unranked 2 GM from an ethical standpoint, destroying other people's game, from an educational standpoint, because the skill disparity is just so big. I personally feel that while it does bring some positives, it's educational. Like, I'm gonna admit it, watching Awkward shit on gold players, like that's really fun to watch, right? But there's a lot of stuff that's fun to watch that comes at the expense of other people, and it's kind of like saying, oh, well, watching like prank videos on YouTube is fun, but I think they're just, if the other person isn't laughing at the end of the prank, that's kind of the only thing that matters.
Mm-hmm.
I have to say though that I've been playing this game for 6 years now, I think. Every time I've done ranked GM, Smurf, or anything like that, all of the negative comments was exclusively from the enemy team. I've never in my life encountered a really negative experience. People saying on my team, when they're on my team, and they're saying, "Oh, you're Smurfing, go play at your original rank." They usually either flame me for thinking I'm doing that because like I'm DPSing as Ana, for example, right? Or they'll say something like, "Oh, bro, you're a god. Thank you for the carry." Never in my life, not a single time, anybody said something negatively about me being the Smurf on their team.
I mean, they're getting free wins, so I feel like you're kind of if I throw a banana at a kid, but then I give the guy next to me $500, he's going to think that banana throw was really lit. So I just
of course. I mean, it's a fair analogy, but the point I'm seeing all of these people in replies, yeah, I'm not having fun when there's a Smurf on my team. I've never actually heard someone being vocal about it. If you're having fun, why don't you leave the game when there's a Smurf on your team? Why don't you throw on purpose to fuck with the Smurf? It never happens when you get the long end of the stick. It always happens when you're the short end of it.
I think that's a slightly different because I think that more speaks to like everyone's or the majority of Overwatch players' entitlement to like I deserve a high rank. So like when I win this game, also I think it's harder for you to know that your Smurf is doing a lot. Like it's easier for the enemy team to know what each player is doing on the enemy team rather than for you to know how much impact your own teammates are having. So I think they feel your presence more. Your teammates were like, yeah, my Ana's carrying because I'm a fucking god on Reinhardt. That's why, right? So like I think there's that. I want to kind of respond to ioStux's point earlier, which is like, well, you're kind of giving everyone else in the lobby a shit experience, right? You're kind of they're gonna come away. I think again, I'm gonna go to I think you could argue it's a bit of a facetious point or a bit of a arbitrary point, but what's to say that the other person who would have come in for awkward would have made a better experience for them? Like I think inherently that posits that the matchmaking is so good and accurate in Overwatch that like had awkward not been there, that would have been a really great and balanced game. But like in my mind, it's almost to the point now where it's like the variance goes so high in Overwatch. What can you really point the finger at like an awkward who's like, I'm on a fresh account and I'm playing, to be like, you are the one throwing the game out of whack here, when without you the game would have been perfectly balanced. Whereas like like I said, some guy decides this game I'm gonna run Reinhardt on Gibraltar because for reasons, and there's no matchmaking to account for it.
Right. So that is actually also a fallacy. So that's a little bit like saying, oh, like my okay, I'm not going to use that analogy, but let me. It's kind of like saying.
Please do the banana again. I'm still
I'm
still trying to understand the banana, man.
Okay, Okay, so it's a little bit like people saying, oh, my aunt got the vaccine, but she died anyways. Like, of course, when awkward isn't in the game, if we replace awkward with another player, there's no guarantee that the experience is going to be more enjoyable. But what we can say is if we take a normal lobby and we replace one of the players with awkward, that is definitely going to make the experience worse, right? So I'm not saying that every single game in comp is like super amazing as long as a Smurf isn't in it, right? Not having a Smurf doesn't automatically make the game amazing. But I think that what Blizzard is trying to do, and what I think the player base wants, is that they can queue for a comp game and know going into it that they have a shot at winning it, as close to a 50% win rate as possible. And as long as Smurfs exist, that is just not a reasonable expectation to have, no matter what Blizzard does about the system, unless they make it super volatile and awkward just gets GM after like one win,
Yeah, that's fair. Awkward.
I think they're closing in on it. I don't know. A lot of people say, yeah, you're playing in gold all the time. I think the Blizzard matchmaking is doing a great job. Honestly, after gold, after the placements, I immediately put in top 500 lobbies. So max, I've maybe ruined 10 games, maybe 10 games. And so I still don't understand the point. Also, there are throwers in the game. Yeah, maybe there are no Smurfs, but there are still people that are throwing. So it's not really a 50-50 anymon
well, yes, I think throwers are also really bad for the game. I also think Smurfs are really bad for the game. I think people who have, play on the Himalayas with satellite internet and disconnect every 5 seconds, that's probably also bad for the game, right? Just because something else is bad doesn't make this less bad.
Yeah, I think that's a fair point. And I do think it's... Go ahead,
I don't necessarily agree with that, because a person that is jumping off the map every 2 seconds, there's nothing to learn from it.
Yeah, and that's really bad. right?
Yeah, it's pretty bad. Yeah, I agree. So now,
yeah, but I think Smurfing is also bad. You know?
Well, yes and no. It depends on what perspective you're looking at. I don't agree with Smurfing. I don't know why people think I am pro Smurfing. It actually contradicts my tweet completely, because I always say challenge yourself, play against better players. And when you're Smurfing, you're really not doing that, because you're just playing against low-rated players. So it's just counterproductive to what I say. It's just by logic.
Anyone for the team.
Yeah, but
Well,
I never advise people. People come to me and ask me, should I learn this character on this one? Should I play on this one? I say no. Play on your main. Always play against the best players you can play against. Always my best advice.
Yes, actually, that's something that, I don't know, Spiley probably heard this a lot as well. There's so many people I coach who have like 3 alt accounts, and they say, oh, whenever I'm on a loss streak on my main, I just go on my alt account that's like a rank lower, you know? And I tell them the same thing. Why? It's such a waste of time.
I agree.
Well,
I think Smurfing is a waste of time.
Well, I was going to add it because the terminology can sometimes get muddled. Obviously, Smurfing in its explicit sense means arbitrarily lowering your SR to you know, force yourself into lobbies you shouldn't be in. Whereas again, unranked GMs, as long as they're just unranked GMs, are not technically Smurfing. You could argue again that you're just leveling a fresh account, and it's on Blizzard to find your MMR as the placement should. Of course, there will be, again, the counterpoint will be, well, at least some games are going to get ruined because they're not going to instantly put you in GM. So at least 1, 2, 3, whatever games there are going to be ruined when they're trying to find your MMR. But I do think what Awkward mentioned is an interesting point to bring up, which is that Blizzard have done a really good job, I think, of there's been a lot of criticism of the MMR based matchmaking that they've kind of been public about, which is that, you know, we're matching you basically MMR, not the number we show you, which causes its own problems. But one benefit of it is that when you do have a new account, and I saw this because I was in Awkward's chat that day when Awkward, I think you were doing Zen, and I came in and you were like, you know, 10 games in and you were like, yeah, I'm getting top 500 lobbies, dude. Like, I bet, you know, my SR still says like plat or gold, but like everybody in the lobby is top 500. And even I experienced this because I made like a fresh account to play Ramatra when he came out, and I was like, I'm just going to play Ramatra. And within like 2 placements, I was getting like master GM lobbies. So they have done a good job of curbing this whole Smurf phenomenon, which is that now when you do make a fresh account, it quite quickly tries to push you even farther than before out of those lobbies that you could be in. So the prevalence of unranked GMs and the effect that they would have detrimentally to an average middle ranked player, I think, is significantly curbed with the MMR based system. I'm curious if this has been your experience as well, Awkward.
Yeah, I mean, as doing a great job. What can I say? I've 10 games in, top 500. I play against top 10 players 10 games in. I really don't know how they do it. Honestly, just very mind blowing to me.
I got your IP.
I don't think that's what it is, because I've done it from multiple locations before. I actually don't think it's the IP thing. But then they said that your individual performance has no bearing on your MMR. But then how can the game recognize this top 500 player really early? So to me, it makes no sense. They maybe not sharing as much as they would like to. Or we would like to. Sorry,
I can actually chime in there. So it's pretty simple, right? So when you have a matchmaking, like an MMR based system, right? It looks at the odds of, you know, let's say you're in gold, right? And it puts you into a gold match, and then it calculates the odds of a gold player, you know, ultimately winning that much. And then if the odds are stacked against you and you end up winning it, you get a really big MMR boost. So when you go on a Smurf account and you start winning a lot, right? Even though it's only 10 games, right? The MMR growth here is compounds upon itself, right? So you win a game that you shouldn't have won, that really boosts your MMR. So your MMR and your displayed skill rating just start to grow like further and further apart, right? So by the 9th game, the amount of MMR that you gain with a single win is something that another player would need to win like 20 games in a row for to even get there. Which ultimately I think just points to how good MMR system, like they've been around for decades now, you know, back then when people were playing chess. So I do think the system is very effective, but that also raises the point, if a 10-hour unranked to GM stream, you know, after like 10 games, how long do 10 games take? Like I'd say like you'd be done with those within the first 3 hours, like easily. If you stomp those games, probably even sooner. So wouldn't that just mean that like the final 7 hours of an unranked to GM stream are basically just the same thing as if you were playing on your main?
You could say, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, this is where the obscuring of the rank system is it kind of makes for a very weird experience where you're basically playing GM games, going 50-50, slowly climbing though. But you rather than, let's say, if you were in Master and you would just win most of those games and get it, you're kind of winning 50-50, having to play a lot more games to then see the rank up, just to put you where you already actually are, just to show the symbol of where you actually already are. So it's a little bit odd, and certainly makes for an odd content experience. But hello guys, SCB here. Just want to quickly interrupt this episode of the Group Up Podcast to say that if you've been enjoying this content, then please do consider supporting me directly via Patreon. It really does help, since Patreon only takes about 10% of your money, where YouTube and Twitch take 40 and 50% respectively. So it supports me and allows me to keep making videos no matter how many views they do or don't get. Also, if you are really enjoying this discussion, then why not consider watching some of my other content? First and foremost, my Twitch stream where this podcast is hosted live, and I stream 5 days a week doing a bunch of other things as well. If you're not much of a Twitch viewer, then you can check out the SVB side channel, where all the best bits from the stream go straight to YouTube in highlight format, including VOD reviews, gameplay, and streamer formats such as the Fantasy Overwatch or Rank Gauntlet that you may have seen other streamers participate in. And finally, if you're sick of Overwatch, then you could check out my other channel, The Soak, which is where I do movie and TV breakdowns. And I've done videos on things like Avatar: The Last Airbender, Pixar's Up, and anime like Haikyuu. So if any of that sounds up your street, then all the links are in the description. But now, back to the discussion. I'm actually curious, since we broached that subject, there's been a lot of discussion on the comp system, but certainly ioStux, you seem a fan of the new revamped comp system with the 5 placements. And...
Oh no! I think it sucks. I think having to play game after game without seeing any change in rank is the most demotivating thing ever. What I like is like the math behind it. Like, I think it's getting better. It's still not perfect. There's still way too many one-sided games and whatnot. In terms of presentation and like the structure of climbing up the tiers, that sucks so bad. I just hope that they change that. Honestly, I thought the previous system in Overwatch 1 was fine. Like, I don't know why they needed to change it. I just think that the matchmaking itself, like how good Blizzard is at detecting, players who aren't quite at the rank that they are, and then getting them to their proper rank as quickly as possible, I think that has gone strides from where it used to be.
Mm-hmm. Spilo, do you have any thoughts on the new system?
I mean, I haven't played tons and tons and tons, but I agree with Stux. I think the fact that you don't get reward immediately for knowing where you're at, and I've even seen a lot of cases of where you technically have a positive win percentage, and yet you either D rank or stay exactly the same. I still feel like there's some gears behind the scenes that we don't fully understand. One thing I wanted to talk about a little bit is with the matchmaking that I don't really like is the variance. I think I'm not exactly in the minority here, but when I'm a platinum or a diamond or a masters player being thrown in top 500 lobbies, and remember we used to complain about, we've got the masters player in a top 500 lobby. Oh no. Now you're like, we have a masters player, great. No diamonds, awesome. No plats, awesome. And we've even seen the screenshots of like these. This guy was gold. What? And I think the problem with that is technically it's balanced. And maybe I'm getting a lot off topic here.
No. Actually, I was going to ask about this anyway. So go ahead.
Sure. Okay. Technically, it's balanced, but I think one thing that is really, really, really important to remember is that when you're playing in a higher ranked lobby as a lower ranked player, you get punished for playing. You get punished for doing the right thing. You just didn't have the mechanics for it. Whereas a top 500 player playing in a, let's say you get thrown into a diamond lobby, right? You have to play in a way or to a level. You don't even play like you would in a top 500 lobby. You have to play totally differently. You're expected to carry, essentially. Whereas in a gold in a top 500 lobby, you're expected to just survive and feed as little as you possibly can. And that's where I really hate the matchmaking, because that's not good competitive integrity. Where I remember I get these questions all the time with like, do players in silver and players in gold and players in plat have to play differently at each rank? The answer used to be no, never. You never had to play differently. But now the answer is, well, it's not so much as the rank that you're in, so much as the lobby that you're in. Because if I'm a gold on a player, and let's say I'm working on my cover usage, but every single time I even walk an inch away from cover, the Widowmaker blows my head off because she's top 500. And I'm trying to look for offensive nade value. So what do? I go into my plat lobby next, and now I'm never looking for any offensive nade value. I'm never peeking, never doing damage, never doing anything because I'm scared to get mechanic diff. Well, now I've taken negative feedback on a positive trait, and now I'm translating that into an even worse habit for what should be at my rank. And I think that's what really ticks me off. It's really, really bad competitive integrity. Like if I'm trying to dribble and practicing dribbling and I'm playing versus Michael Jordan, he steals the ball from me every single time. I don't want the ball. Don't give it to me anymore, right? You can't learn like that. And that really ticks me off.
That's a very fair point. I mean, is that something you found in your games, Awkward? Like the sort of variance of the players in the lobby is higher than in Overwatch 1 almost?
I don't play often in high elo at this point, like in my main account, so I don't have enough data for me to just say something. I don't want to say something that I don't know about, so I'd rather it's not comment because I don't know.
That's very fair. ioStux?
No, honestly, I'm just gonna echo what Spilo said. You're so well spoken. It's disgusting.
That's
You know?
okay. I have a lot of practice talking.
He sets the bar too high. But no, I 100% agree. So I actually, little self-plug. I recently made a video about this, kind of about the concept of valid environments and ecological validity, where if your practice environment, so if ranked just starts to get too volatile, you know, in one game you're playing against a Smurf and then you have a thrower and then this and then that, it makes it very difficult to kind of make small adjustments to your playstyle and to then see how that affects your gameplay, right? The way that you get better is saying, okay, I feel like I'm not getting enough value out of my nades. You know, maybe I need to be a little bit more greedy with them. But then you go into a game and all of a sudden the entire circumstances have just completely changed. And all of a sudden the play doesn't work or it does work. And you get so many, it's kind of, you know, I call it the red herring effect, where you draw false conclusions thinking that you're doing the right thing. And okay, the number one reason why players are hard-stuck, from my experience, the number one reason is that they develop a certain play style in lower ranks that only works at those lower ranks. So the classical example here is DPS Moira players who just don't heal at all. They just flank and solo kill the backline. So they're like in bronze. They DPS Moira, they climb to gold. And then because they've won so many games with that playstyle, that kind of embeds that playstyle in their heads. And then when they review themselves, when the games all of a sudden aren't working as well, they're not going to question their playstyle because they've seen results. They've seen, oh, I've climbed like 2 tiers being a DPS Moira. Clearly, at least I've understood this part about playing Moira. That's like the number one reason, in my opinion, why people are hard-stuck. And I think the ranked system right now makes it too easy for people to go down that rabbit hole.
Yeah, it's an interesting point. Actually, it vividly reminds me of like the video that actually got me into content creation that I first made was what I learned as a GM in Gold, where I specifically, this is when I was good at the game and I did a soft version of Unranked GM where I just made an alt account to play DPS and I got put in Gold. And I remember talking about this exact thing where I was like, you know, Moira is like the perfect trap hero for this, where, you know, people go off and they do this and they think that's working. And actually to your point that you made earlier about like, you know, well, why don't you organize specific lobbies to test people smurfing, or, you know, test like one person in variants. I've actually been doing that for a while as well. And the point you made is very true, where what we do is we get players who think they deserve it to be a higher rank and we put them in that lobby. So I've taken many times, I've taken players who are like gold, who are platinum, and they're like, yeah, I could hack it in the GM lobby. And, you know, 9 out of 10 times the people lose and they get stomped and they kind of realize, oh, damn, that was a whole nother experience. The times when people win almost always are the times when they just like AFK. And there was a very large number of people who won, like disproportionately people won playing Moira or Mercy as like in the GM lobby and just sitting and like just healing and just surviving. And I think that, like, and often you talk to them afterwards, they come away real hyped because it's like fresh out from the battlefield, right? They're like, oh yeah, it felt so good, SCB. Like, oh man, I popped off and I won super hard. And, you know, me and the rest of the chat, we're watching and we're just like, damn, this guy's just like, he never has Moira juice left. It's just guardian angeled into Narnia. Like, what's going on? Like, this is not good gameplay. But it kind of speaks to the point that Spilo made as well. Like, there's this negative feedback where actually when you're the weak player in the higher lobby, is like the best thing to do is just AFK and don't die, which is hard to do on some roles. Like, it's hard to do on tank. If you just tank and you're AFK, well, you're tossing the game for the team. Now you kind of actually need to feed a little bit. And then the reverse is also equally frustrating, which is when, because I have felt in these positions myself, is sometimes you get put in the lobby and the matchmaker is like, you should deadlift this game, by the way. Like, you're expected to like make up for your teammates here. And that's like a really horrifically frustrating experience, because then you're like, who you're gonna be mad, but like who should you be mad at? Like, because you're gonna be like, man, my teammates are feeding their brains out. Like, what am I supposed to do here? But you can't be mad at them because they're just doing their thing. They're just playing with the game they play, and you're stuck railing the gods of Blizzard to be like, why did you put me in this game and expect me to like deadlift? Like, that's not a fair assumption of a player. Like, what, I shouldn't be expected to carry the lobby to win the game. That seems very harsh.
Yeah,
so there's definitely go ahead.
It's easy to not be the reason your team lost. It's hard to be the reason your team won.
100%.
I want to hear what Awkward has to say, because I think one of the reasons why this is so bad is in those percentage of games where you are the lower ranked player, it encourages that passive playstyle, which is, I'm sure Awkward preaches over and over and over again, is not what you want to be doing when you're trying to improve, even something like support. You need to be actively limit testing, stress testing, find out when I can be damaging, when I can go on the offensive, when I should be going on the defensive. But that's the real trick. So Awkward, have you ever, I'm curious to, like, do you run into support players that have that mindset often?
Yeah, I run a lot of them. I think you said it really good beforehand. I think you mentioned that it doesn't matter what rank you are, your play style doesn't need to be changed. You just need to play. Ana does damage across all ranks, bronze, GM, like Overwatch League. It doesn't matter what level. Just what he can get away with, what he can't is different across the ranks, but it's the same thing. But I do see a lot of people who think, oh, they have a Widow, or they have this, I can't play this and this. And also, I think that the matchmaker should put you in games where you have to carry, because that's how you learn. Sometimes when you ask for strength and God gives you adversity, you should take it with open arms.
All right, I'll remember that. Next time I'm in that situation, I'm gonna think of my man Awkward. And I'm gonna be like, God giveth and God taketh away, man. What can I say?
But it's really true, because if you want to become better, why would you want easy matchmaking where you just have to exist rather than really deadlift the game? It's counterproductive. It doesn't make sense.
Right.
That's a fair POV. I think that's a fair POV. Yeah, I mean, and that actually brings up nicely as well another little awkward tweet before we move on to more broad pastures, which is just one more thing I want to touch on about mentality and ego, because I think this is another relevant point, especially when I ask you guys, since you've dealt with so many different types of players of different skill. So I'm just quickly going to read the tweet again, and then again, Awkward, if you want to elaborate, feel free. Which is that my ego is why I have been rank 1 in the world numerous times. My ego is why I went from gold to top 500 in less than a month when I started. My ego is why I'm competent. I don't want to lose and be average at best. I want to be better for myself. Your ego can be your fuel. So presumably that's a statement you stand by.
Of course, I stand by everything that I say. I think the best example is the people that are sitting over here. One is a very, very famous coach. One was an Overwatch League coach. And I think both of them were driven by deserving, like, some sense of self where they deserve to be better. I don't want to be this open division coach. I want to be an Overwatch League. I don't want to be some guy that nobody knows. I'm going to do some, YouTube videos. I become a famous coach. I'm going to get a lot of clients. You have a famous podcast, right? You didn't want to be that guy who just, has 2 viewers on the stream when he walks a podcast. So there's some sense of ego that you want better for yourself. And everything, you ask any professional sports player, and it doesn't matter, NBA, soccer, as Americans would like to call it, video games, all the top level, all the elite have a sense of ego. They want it better for themselves, and they made it happen. They worked for it, and they did it.
Okay, now that's a statement I'm curious to unpack. I'm going to take it to Spilo, because you dealt with lots of different teams, Spilo, different abilities. Has there been like a consistent theme? And you that's both in esports and outside of esports. Is the ego a theme?
Oh yeah, I mean, it's a big thing. I mean, I don't think, I agree with Awkward. I don't think you're ever going to be great at anything without some form of ego. I think ego is something that gets put in a really bad light, but I think that's always when we see the toxic, I wouldn't even say an extreme ego, but I'd say misdirected ego. My ego has always been, even personally, not even talking about the players I've worked with, has been a confidence that when I really apply myself to something, I know I'm not really great at it now. I don't even really care if I'm great at it right now. But I have the confidence that the process, the mentality that I have when it comes to improvement will mean that I will be great at it now. I'm a great loser because I know you got to lose to win, right? And I've tried to adapt that mindset with my coaching and with even just games or anything else sports, whatever. And to me, that's where, at least I think that's where a productive variation of ego is, where it's like, I'm not really concerned about I have to defend my own great. I'm great. I'm great. I'm the best. I'm the best. But I know that I'm just focused on the process, and that eventually I will be great. I think a lot of younger players, especially, I think this is a big problem, especially in esports, because you have a lot of players that kind of come in and they don't really have a lot of dynamics to their personality or who they are as people. They are just an great Overwatch player. They don't have a great social life. They don't have a lot of other life skills. They don't have a lot of friends. So if you take their skill or you can test their skills as an Overwatch player, there's nothing else there. And so when you look at ego there, I think there's really two ways that you can look at that. One is, hey, let's not worry about how good you are right now, because that's just distracting yourself, right? Because if you think I'm great right now, you're not putting the attention on what you need to do to get even better. And so then if I'm trying to give you feedback or assist you and like, well, I think you should be trying this, then there's a confrontation of, oh, no, I'm already great. There's a wall there, right? And that can prevent you from being an even better player. So the ego is ironic because it makes you worse than you are. And the other way that I would approach that is when you have players that have their entire identity tied up into one specific thing, then it can be very destructive. So I think one player that I consistently and constantly bring up is Hadi with London this past season, who actually developed himself as a player in game by developing his identity out of the game. So when things went badly in scrims, or we had a couple of tough losses, or there was a lot of like internal conflict in the team, if he's not playing well, right, it's not the end of the world. He's able to cope with those negative experiences a lot better because he knows that I'm not just an Overwatch player. I'm also a weightlifter and a friend and and a mentor to other people. And ironically, that makes him a better player in game because he's able to cope with those negative experiences so much better than a player who's only an Overwatch player and nothing but an Overwatch player. So to agree with Awkward there, you have to have the ego. You have to think that if I'm not the best now, I will be the best. I trust the process. I really want this. I love this. But it has to be productively directed. Otherwise, it will hurt your ego. It will actually prevent you from being what you want to be.
Very eloquent again. ioStux, I feel like you disagreed with this a little bit, at least on Twitter.
Okay, so first of all, there's two parts to this. Can we define ego? Because I feel like ego is like everyone kind of has a different perspective. So my personal definition of ego is a different word that also comes from psychology called self-efficacy. And basically, the idea behind self-efficacy, the topic really came up when they started to look at, women in the workplace and why a lot of management positions kind of favor men over women. And one thing, not conclusive, but one thing they found is that self-efficacy, for some reason, was bigger in men. And the idea behind self-efficacy is that if you have self-efficacy, you believe that if you invest time and effort into an endeavor, that you can better yourself and you can reach your goal. So for example, if I say, I've never played the guitar before, but if I spend an hour every day for the next year, I'm going to be pretty decent at it, right? That's self-efficacy. Whereas the opposite would be saying, oh, it doesn't matter how many hours I aim train or practice the guitar or practice drawing, I'm never going to be one of the greats. That's a lack of self-efficacy. And self-efficacy is 100% crucial. If you don't believe that you can be the best player in the world, you're not going to be the best player in the world. There's so many people who come to me and they say, oh, my biggest issue is confidence. The main reason I want to improve is so that I can be more confident. But that's not really how it works. Like, first you need confidence in yourself in order to improve. Right? You can't just magically get good and then all of a sudden, feel that sense of self-efficacy. And to kind of go back to the tweet that Awkward posted. So fundamentally, from a mindset perspective, I do agree, because I think that's what you meant by ego, like that, aspiring for greatness, knowing that you can become the best support in the world. That's I'm assuming what you meant by ego. And that is 100% super important. The main part that I disliked about that tweet is you mentioned that, or you said, quote, my ego is why I went from gold to top 500 in less than a month when I started. And I kind of tried to look at that from the perspective of, someone who's kind of in a metal rank and they're trying to improve. And, to them, it kind of reads like, oh, all I need to do is develop an ego and, then I can get to top 500 in a month. Like, he managed to do it in a month. But ultimately the main reason that you manage to climb that quickly in Overwatch is because you have a very significant amount of FPS experience, before you even played Overwatch, right? And I think ego is important, but I just think that with the way you phrased things, it can be misinterpreted, and people might kind of overvalue it, and feel bad about their lack of progress.
Well, the first thing, everybody can misinterpret everything. Well, it's not my fault. That's the first thing. And the second thing is that, yes, because I had a lot of experience, I went from gold top 500. But how did I get to a position where I can be very, very, very good player? Since day one, I believed in myself. I had ego. I got smoked every first day that I log into Overwatch. I get smoked. I'm in gold. I don't remember. I'm in gold. I play against diamond play. I get smoked. I'm like, fuck. You know what? Who is this guy? How is he beating me? Okay, let's get to work. Let's be better. They get to diamond, getting smoked by masters. All right, let's see how it is. Getting smoked again. Got my ass whooped, and I said I deserve better. I have to be better than this guy. And eventually, it just goes on and on, right? And I was always happy. By the way, this again cycles back to the Smurf thing. I was always happy to play against players that are better than me because I was like, okay, let's see what this guy does that I don't. I'm gonna get smoked by him. But one day, I know I'm going to be better. Why? Because I trust myself to learn, and I do everything I can, and I'm a hard worker, etc., etc. So yes, you're not gonna get there in a month, but if you truly don't believe that you can get better, you're never gonna get better. It's not about a month, a year. It doesn't matter. You'll never get there.
Yes, that's what I agree with, right? The idea of self-efficacy, if you don't believe that you have what it takes, or that for some reason you're just not born with the right genes to be top 500 or something, then yes, you're not going to reach that. And I think that's very interesting because it's really funny. When I was kind of mad at Overwatch 1, my friends kind of gaslit me into playing League of Legends with them, and it was a very interesting experience because I'm really, really bad at that game. And even though I got absolutely dunked on in every single game, like, it didn't really matter to me because I always knew that the other person is like better than me. But if I had invested the same amount of time that they have, I would just absolutely stomp them, right? So it's kind of being better at improving, even if the current skill level isn't quite there. So basically what I'm saying is that I agree with you.
Mm-hmm. At this point, I must point out. Go ahead.
Sorry, go ahead. Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
I was going to say, at this point, we must point out that we have 4 people born in 4 different countries, potentially speaking multiple languages here in this call. So if there's ambiguity of the definition of a word that particularly is loaded even amongst native English speakers, then I think that can be forgiven, that people interpret it slightly differently. But go ahead, Spilo.
I have a question for Awkward or ioStux here. So I think the definition of self-efficacy by having the confidence that you will be able to develop a skill if you put the time into it is obviously crucial, right? And then having that prior to picking up a skill is what oftentimes allows you to develop the skill faster at a better rate than anybody else, right? I think everybody in this call could probably, if you get to GM with one game, you're gonna be able to get to a high rank with another game, like almost guaranteed if you put the hours in. My problem here is this: how do you say? Because we're all coaches to some degree. Even SVP, you've got a lot of experience as a coach as well. So how do you improve somebody who doesn't have that self-efficacy? Now, obviously, I'm dipping into like psychology couch level here because that might be a big lifelong problem, and it usually is, right? But in my experience, what I've tried to do with people like that is I've tried to, okay, you don't have self-efficacy, you don't have a lot of confidence right now. Let's try and get you started on accomplishing small things one step at a time, and then build confidence through accomplishing things. Even when I was back working with kids, a lot of kids that weren't very confident, once they reached a certain belt or learned a couple of strikes or learned a grappling move or a wrestling move, that would slowly build confidence. So is that the only way, or is there some sort of like psychological motivation? Is it just saying, hey, you're gonna be trash until you actually fake it till you make it with the confidence? I mean, I know that worked for me in high school. I had to fake it till you make it at mentality when it came to my personality for a little while, and eventually developed real confidence. But how do you do that? I guess I'm curious to see what you two think.
Well, I can speak for people that I coach. I agree that your confidence comes through your experience. You cannot be a confident person if you hasn't succeeded through adversity. So the way that I personally approach this is that you have to practice. You have to work through so let's say you want to work on Ana and you're not confident that you hit your shots, right? I'm not. A lot of people say that. I can DPS like you because my aim sucks. I can improve. No confidence. So what I tell them, well, how's the only way to improve? How is the only way for you to become confident talking to girls? It's pretty simple. You go talk to a lot of girls. Same thing with aim. Same thing with Overwatch. How do you become better DPS and more confident? Well, start shooting. You'll miss a bunch of times, but eventually it will be better and better. And then when you will see with your own two eyes that it becomes better, you will be more confident. It's like, oh, hey, I killed this guy. Let's try again. Let's try again. And slowly and gradually builds up. I don't know what the psychological thing behind it, because, well, I'm not a psychologist, but this just from my experience.
ioStux?
Yeah, no, I completely agree with that. So my personal definition of confidence is that ultimately what confidence is just a lack of fear of failure, right? So if I'm at a bar and a friend of mine, he just randomly walks up to a girl and he just, he gets rejected or something, right? You would say that was a really confident move, right? But what made that move confident isn't that he thinks that he's hot shit and every single girl is going to love him and he's so amazing. What makes him confident is that he could walk there and he knew that even the most negative outcome here, she could just spill her drink over me. Like, even the most negative outcome, I'm fine with that. And I think that's confidence. And it's the same when you want to improve at Overwatch. So many people, they are so focused on winning that they just stop limit testing and they stop trying stuff out. Sometimes you do have to go on a weird flank as Kiriko and try to 1v1 their Widow, because, I mean, sure, maybe that's not the best thing to do, but how are you going to figure that out if you don't try? And that's kind of a big, internal conflict that people have, because on one hand, they want to go into their ranked games and they want to try hard and they don't want to feed and they want to play safe and consistent. But then on the other hand, they have to do things that they haven't done before. They have to maybe pick up a new character or try out a new playstyle or just do something that they haven't done before in order to learn from it. But obviously that's going to have a negative effect on their skill, right? And ultimately, the way that confidence really helps people climb is saying, it's okay for me to try these things out, and maybe I'm going to get flamed by my team and I'm going to embarrass myself and maybe I'm going to drop down a rank or so. But I don't care about that. I don't care about those failures. I'm okay with that. I'm okay if my teammates just flame me, because I know that I'm going to learn something from that. I know that in the long run, when we start to look at multiple months, I'm going to be higher than where I am right now, right? Like the stock market, it goes up, it goes down, it goes up, it goes down. But if you look back 30 years, it goes up more than it goes down. And it's kind of the same thing with skill levels. Sometimes you're on a loss streak, sometimes you're on a win streak. But as long as you focus on improvement, you'll end up higher than where you were at the start.
No, I think those are all very well said points from all you guys, and I pretty much agree with them. I think it's the idea of dissonance that is usually where pain comes from. Is usually like when your reality conflicts with what something is reflecting back to you. That's usually when people feel pain, right? So people, when a question I get a lot is, how do I get over comp anxiety? And that's like I think the first thing I always say is like, well, why do you care if you lose? Because it's like, I think people have that like dissonance of like, if I lose, it must be comp telling me that I'm bad. And it's like you're letting that it's like that external versus internal mindset, like letting your sense of self be defined by external factors versus internal factors. So letting the comp system tell you whether you're a worthwhile human or not is generally a bad idea. I think it's interesting because you guys have coached probably one person for longer than I have. Like I've only a few times coached like one individual for a lengthy period of time. Most of the time it's like a one and done. And I always try to so my approach is a little bit different, and I haven't really dedicated myself to coaching for quite a while, so you guys definitely the experts on this, but I try to take a more wide and holistic approach of I always say I can't tell you how you know yourself best. Like I can't tell you like you have to understand for yourself. And I truly do believe that like understanding yourself is the most rewarding thing any human being can do, is like understanding what makes them tick and what makes them sad and what makes them happy. And that's what I always try to encourage people to do. So if I had someone who was like lacking confidence, I would just kind of like try and really unpack where that lack of confidence comes from. Like why, like firstly, what do you care about? What are your priorities? So do you really want to be good at Overwatch? Because like not everyone has to be good at everything. People sometimes come and they're like, I really want to be good at Overwatch, but I don't want to spend more than like 2 hours doing it like per week. Like that's me. And I'm like, well, your desires conflict with like what you're actually willing to put in and like what your mentality and approach is, right? Like you want to be good at Overwatch, but not enough, not bad enough, right? You don't want to actually be good like you don't want to be good bad enough. So that's a weird sentence to say, but hopefully it makes sense. And I think that's something that can be helpful to make people understand is like you may really think you want this, but you don't, in the classic Blizzard fashion. Like you don't actually, your priorities are elsewhere, and that's fine. It's fine to have other priorities. It's fine to say, actually, my like social life is more important to me, and I wouldn't want to give it up for an extra 100 SR in Overwatch. And that's okay that's okay to believe, I think. So I think you really have to assess, like, is this, because you can't be amazing at everything. And as much as I agree as well with your initial point, Spilo, about, I do think people who tend to get good at one game can often transfer that. That's usually, I think, because of like the ability to understand patterns, I think is like a very important. I've been wanting for the longest time to write a book about this, actually, about like how to spot patterns in like different video games so that you can kind of almost, you know, skip a lot of the learning curve. But again, that's not a skill set everyone values or has. So you gotta figure out, what is my skill set? What is the area that I'm good at? And it's okay to not be what you think you want to be good at, which is Overwatch. So hopefully that answers your question, Spilo.
I think there's a little bit of ego involved in there too, even with your example when it comes to like the 2 hours. When people come in there and like, oh, I want to be good at Overwatch, but I'm only willing to give it 2 hours. To me, that comes almost, sometimes I get those sessions as well, and it's usually there's a little bit of ego involved to where I can't handle being bad at a game, but I'm only willing to put in 2 hours. And I'm like, well, you have some issues we need to sort out, because if you're only putting 2 hours in something, you're not going to be good at that, and you just need to live with that. It just needs to be a casual thing for you, and that's totally fine, but some people don't handle that super well. I want to add as well, when it comes to the pattern thing, I also think learning how to learn something is really helpful as well.
Yes.
Like learning just how to master something. That is ubiquitous, universal, whatever term you want to use, I think.
100%.
To kind of add to that, so very, very interesting. That's something that I actually experience very often. Sometimes I get people, and whenever they book an appointment with me, they need to fill out a form with some baseline information. And I always ask them, how many hours a week can you put in? And, you know, sometimes I have appointments for the day, and I open up that form to kind of prepare for them. And then it just says like 4 hours a week. You know, and then they also need to answer, what is your goal? And they write like GM or top 500. And the first thing that I tell them in the session is, you don't want to do this, because with every single session you will have, your knowledge is going to increase. You're going to learn more about the game, more about macro concepts, more about interactions. You're going to learn a lot. I can promise you that you're going to learn a lot, but your skill is gonna be down here, because you just don't have enough time to practice it, right? So the more knowledgeable you get, the more I coach you, the more frustrated you'll be at like how bad you actually are at the game, right? So, you know, after like 3 or 4 sessions of that, like skill-wise in game, they're the exact same, except now they're no longer oblivious to how bad they are. And that is just so depressing.
That's the coach curse. That's why I hate playing ranked. I'm like,
what
am I doing? What am I doing? I'm so bad at this game.
Yeah.
I have so many out of body moments for that, where I literally like, because I try to talk about my like thought process a lot on stream. So sometimes I'm literally like, I will do something, and like literally a second later I'm like, man, why did I just do that? Like that was the dumbest thing I've ever done. Like I was just completely fed my brains out. Like what's going on?
Yeah, I think that's why a lot of coaches honestly don't play the game, because it's just so frustrating. You know you're washed up. Like you can look at your gameplay and you can just absolutely tear it apart, and you know there's nothing you can do about it unless you're going to just spend fucking 30 hours a week on the game again.
Yeah, I mean, Awkward is sitting there smiling because he's been able to juggle both. He's a great coach and a great player.
I don't have that problem, you know, but it do happen that I make a very dumb mistake, and I'm like, I can immediately recognize that, But I do pretty well for myself in ranked ladder. I usually don't lose.
It's true.
Yeah.
That brings me to an interesting point. Like, you know, it's been a very fascinating discussion on like sort of mentality and stuff. But kind of bringing it back to Overwatch, I was curious as well just to see how you guys have felt the shift to just everything about Overwatch 2, not just 5v5, but a lot of the changes that have come through. Like CC's been tuned down, and shields and tanks are kind of being looked at a lot, and all these concepts. I mean, actually, let me just get your general feelings. If you could summarize for me, like in a couple sentences, how you view Overwatch 2 as having shifted, and what your opinion on that shift is. Like, is it good for the game, bad for the game? And like, yeah, just kind of broader concepts, then we'll kind of dive deeper into it. So let's start with Spilo. Spilo, like, how have you viewed the shift to Overwatch 2 in general?
Good. I think 5v5 there's a lot more space to pay attention. It's easier to track what's going on. There's more, I guess, I hate using this word, but there's more carry potential with each player in the team. playing one-dimensionally. It's harder. You have to play more dynamically. Even the hero design, I think, mirrors that. There's people are we're moving away from archetypes when it comes to hero design, for better or worse. So I think for the most part, I think it's a good game.
Nice. Awkward.
I would agree it's a better game. I don't particularly think it's a good game. I think it's better. 5-on-5 is something that I've been an advocate for even years before it came out. I always suggested that.
Yeah, funny story actually, to quickly interject. Me and Awkward, I remember vividly, we spoke about 5v5 like, a long good time before it was ever announced. We were both like, I think this would be better. I think this would be better. So yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I think that there's a fundamental misunderstanding from the Blizzard team. I really don't know what's happening behind the scenes, but the balance patches are not great. I think that the philosophy is not the best. I think they're a little bit out of touch with not only the player base, but what makes a game fun to play. For me, the recent balance patch, let's talk about it for a second, is that I just don't. It seems out of touch. It seems there's no reason for it. Some of the changes. But yeah, it is way better than Overwatch 1, but it still has room for improvement.
We'll definitely get into that, but first, ioStux.
Yeah, no, I agree. 5v5 is brilliant. I know that it was a little bit controversial at first, especially the impact that it had on the esports scene, because it sure shook things up a little from a roster perspective. But 5v5 is brilliant. Honestly, the main thing that I really like about Overwatch 2 is that we have things to look forward to again. Like in Overwatch 1, at the end, it was just so hard to get friends back into the game, because they're like, oh, what's changed? And I'm like, well, you remember Echo? She released 2 years ago. You can play her again. But now there's actual, whenever there's a new season, there's something to kind of look forward to, and there's a new map and there's a new character. I think the biggest issue that I have with the game right now is that because Overwatch has been out for so long, it's kind of reached a point now where newer characters in terms of kit and complexity and design are just at a very, very different level than characters that were released initially. So I think the best example of this, in my opinion, is Cassidy's ultimate. I genuinely have no idea what that ability even, why that is still in the game, and I think it's good that, for example, Bastion got reworked. I think since his rework, he's much better, but I personally hope that Blizzard is not just looking at adding new characters. I think that a lot of the old characters, at least certain parts of their kit are a little bit outdated and just don't fit 5v5 and kind of the new characters and kind of the new environment they're in as well as they used to.
I think it's a really
it's the dynamics.
Go ahead.
It's the dynamics. I think you look at a hero like Orisa, you look at a hero like Kiriko, Sojourn, everything has a little bit of mobility, everything has a little bit of range, has some cooldowns to juggle. There's not a spam hero, brawl hero, speed hero, Junkrat, even the original Reinhardt design. How do you balance Junkrat? How do you, the hero design is almost flawed inherently. How do you balance, like we said, they're still trying with Bastion, but ultimately, even where he is now, it still doesn't feel good losing to a Bastion. I feel like he's putting in infinitely lower value. And then you look at heroes like Reinhardt, who I think have had largely successful reworks. Well, what they've done, I feel, is they've added dynamics. They've given him 2 fire strikes. There's more range. They've reduced the charge cooldown. They've allowed you to cancel charge. So you can actually use it for mobility now, right? It's not just an I'm dead button. But obviously, there's some characters that still have not aged so well and need a lot of work. I think Mercy's one of them as well, whose initial design feels like it was more of a flying heal bot, and obviously people don't like that anymore. It's not a big surprise, but we still don't know what we want to do with it. And then even coming from the newer character side of things, they do tend to be a little bit overtuned because dynamics is great. I personally enjoyed the more dynamic approach, but they do have a tendency to be overtuned. Like Sojourn was high damage in close range, the best sniper in the game, one of the best mobility cooldowns in the game, one of the best AoE abilities in the game. Kiriko is the best TP, best defensive cooldown, best ultimate, immortality, the highest healing per second, I believe, output for a long period of time as well. And so obviously, when we introduce characters with a lot of these dynamics, I think we need to also keep in mind that the dynamics in of itself is a huge strength. and you need to balance accordingly. And I don't think the Overwatch dev team, I know inevitably it's going to come up. Every one of SVB's discussions, it was inevitable. But I do think that that's something that's not recognized fast enough. And that leads to situations where we have people that are just like, oh, gee, this hero is continually strong. And I had a discussion last week with Boger, and he was saying another problem with the dynamics is that a lot of the times simply existing with some of the newer hero designs provides too much value. So Kiriko doesn't need to utilize a lot of her dynamic and utility to get value and do more than an Ana, at least in the past, right? Same thing with Orisa, right? It is infinitely harder to play Winston into Orisa and vice versa, or Orisa into Reinhardt than vice versa. And I think that's kind of where like there is a lot of dynamic and a skill ceiling to an Orisa, but you don't need to do that to be good at the hero, to get value out of the hero. And I think that's where we have flaws in the old design, but even the new design, while they're fun to play, they don't. We got this going on a lot. It doesn't work out super well.
Yeah, I think it's a very, very good point. I think both of you kind of made me think of something actually, which is that, you know, recently Apex Legends had a big overhaul. They almost had like an Overwatch 2 kind of moment. I don't know if all of you have been keeping up, but they basically have had to have like a bit of a reckoning, because I think this is the nature of a multiplayer live service game. Over time, people get bored, they get angry, and their frustrations pile up, and things that are frustrating, like things that are like fresh at the start of the game's release, suddenly start become frustrating slowly. Oh, you know, this character's busted, you never address this character, you never address this problem, like this weapon is a problem, that is it, and these things slowly build, and then eventually you get to like dead game, devs don't care, devs are clueless. And actually what Apex Legends have decided to do is like actually take almost like a year to rethink everything, and they've said we're not going to release any more new heroes for like a whole year basically. Instead, we're going to rework our old heroes and like really look at like holistic changes to like how the game feels and plays, and they're going to change rank, and they're going to change, like going to add like a weapon that they haven't done for a long time. And like, I guess in a way, someone will say, well, isn't that what Overwatch 2 was supposed to be? Well, yes, but mostly in the PvE side, like mostly it was like we're adding a PvE. We did shift to 5v5 in Overwatch 2, and largely, I still am amazed at how largely successful it was that they just kind of removed a hero and didn't do too many other changes, like big picture, and it's still kind of like, yeah, it actually works. What the hell? It actually plays really well. But I wonder if at some point they will need to do a similar thing of just, actually, we need to pause hero releases for a bit and actually just go back and make sure every previous hero realigns themselves with the new philosophies we've shifted. Because otherwise what ends up happening is like, this is something I've spoken about on the podcast a few times. There's like a lot of forgotten heroes. Like Sombra, I think, is another one that stands out. Is like, they were like, that was one of the two things alongside Bastion. They were like, we're gonna look, we did a Sombra and a Bastion rework, aren't they great now? And then one season into the game, everyone's like, that's dog, we hate it, change that. And now they've had to like basically nerf her to the point where no one ever played her. And now they're like, we're gonna rework, you know, we're gonna do something to her again. Brig is another example. Since release, no one's ever been happy. At no point have people been like, yeah, okay, that she's good now. And we've been talking about this rally rework for what feels like, you know, a year. That, oh, there's a new rally coming. So I wonder if like at some point they'll have to actually stop and address like this sort of backfill of heroes that have coasted along without actually being adapted to an Overwatch 2 playstyle. I wonder. I'm curious to you guys' thoughts on like any of that. Otherwise, I'm also curious to talk about like some of this balance changes that Awkward was alluding to. So any thoughts on any of what we've been mentioning so far?
I think that a lot of things fundamentally should be changed. I think maps need to be changed fundamentally, like the new maps that they just put an extra box here and there, like some rock. It's not what it's needed. So let's talk about 2CP for a second. I'll quickly drift to it.
Yeah, go for it.
The reason why 2CP was very, very hard is because everyone had to push through one choke in the game. Just one choke. You had one big door, one big gate. Everybody had to push through as a team. And all the team efforts went to pushing through the choke. And it became almost impossible for the attacker side to push through. That's why a lot of the maps have multiple openings. You know, you can go from the left side, you can go from the right side, but usually there's one main choke. 2CP, exclusively one choke. That's why it was so hard. That's why everybody picked Symmetra, just TP on point. So now what the problem is that a defender side is way, way too strong compared to the attacker side in most of the maps, because the defender side has the advantage of controlling a big portion of the map while the rest are stuck in a small box. So adding a box or a rock here and there doesn't really change it. Now, another thing that I'd like to drift back is the heroes. I think some heroes, as you guys said, and I completely agree, need to be either reworked or get kicked to the PvE section. Moira, Brig, all of this stuff, PvE. No, they're not necessary for PvP. Simply because the value they provide don't require a lot of skill, and it seems very frustrating for people who would like to be rewarded for their play. For a good play, it's hard to be rewarded when there's a hero that counters you with significant less skill required. So maps, heroes, changes, like balance changes, but we'll talk about it a little bit later.
No, I like those points, and I also applaud your ability to just shrug off the inevitable hatred that you know that comment would bring, and just be like, fuck it, throw that out in the ether, let's go. ioStux, what do you think about any of this?
So obviously a bit of a hot take from Awkward to remove those characters, but I think he raises a very good point, and that is skill expression. So in my opinion, there are certain characters in the game that just make it very, very difficult for players to like really, stick their teeth into them, because they're just not, like their depth is a little bit more like ephemeral, I guess. And Brigitte and Moira definitely kind of fall into that category, where there's obviously a very big difference between an amazing Moira player and a really bad Moira player. But the question is, how fun is that to watch? How fun is that to play? How fun is that to play against? And I think that some characters, they just don't quite have that depth. Like, for example, I think Junker Queen, like out of the new characters we've had in the game so far, just from a raw design perspective, is the best Overwatch 2 character that they've made so far, because the depth of just stacking multiple dots, and now the cooldown reset on her axe and everything, and the knife is just super difficult to hit. I think she just offers so much, where if you look at a really, really good Junker Queen player, you can really just get like hyped up and like, oh, I want to do that too. But then you have characters, with Mercy, for example, where they're kind of unsure what they want to do, because I think certain characters like Mercy or Moira, their identity is to be simple, and I just don't know in the long run how compatible that is going to be when new characters presumably are only going to get more flashy and more complex. Does a character like Mercy even fit into the game still then, or do they need to kind of change things? One thing that League of Legends, for example, does is or that's kind of a meme. A lot of characters back then had like point and click abilities, like Tarek's old stun. And whenever they would rework a character, they would just take those point and click abilities and they would turn them into skill shots that need to be aimed, And maybe Blizzard is going to do something similar, Maybe Mercy's beam is going to turn into like a Symmetra beam that heals people, so that Mercy players need to aim. I don't know, but that's kind of my main concern that I have, with the game, that I think some characters can afford to be more interesting than they are right now.
I had some thoughts on this.
I love that. One second. I want to just preface that we started that discussion by ioStux saying, I applaud Awkward for just throwing out there that maybe Brig and Moira should go. And then he finishes his sentence like, maybe Mercy needs to go. I don't know, dog. Like, what's up? Just straight up in there.
Man, Awkward is just saying what we're thinking. I'm just trying to get it out there without getting as much hate.
I appreciate it. No, I think it's a fair point. But yeah, Spilo, go ahead.
All right, so I'll throw my name on the hate mail, thank you bomb list as well. Now, I do think I've talked about there needs to be, I think, for lack of a better term, a no list. Either these are heroes that need reworks, or these are heroes that we are open and honest with. Moira is just not a top 500 hero. She's a hero that you can get started in the game, but there's a limited ceiling with how good she's going to get. And if we're honest with that, then we don't have to have any complaints from the GM top 500 Moira community that this hero isn't viable in high ranks. Well, sorry, that's what the hero is limited. That's what the hero ceiling is. Or I'm also totally fine if we were to make adjustments to the hero to make it more interesting. Again, not even mechanically, right? It doesn't look at a hero like Winston, right? Obviously, there are absolute mechanics with Winston, but outside of Primal and a little bit of the right click now, most of the Winston play is not mechanics. It's decision making and positioning and things like that. Well, Moira doesn't have that, right? Moira, there's a lot of complexity to the hero, but proportionately, no. And I think we either need to shift heroes into, okay, these are basic heroes, or we need to rework those heroes to make them more interesting. And the problem is Blizzard doesn't seem to have the guts to do that, to decide that. we look at something like the Mercy changes, that seems like they're really trying to make the hero difficult and nuanced and interesting. And I applaud that. Good for them. But then Moira gets, what do they get, an ult buff charge? But it's still Moira. And people are like, well, Moira's still trash tier. Well, good. She should remain trash tier. Roadhog should remain trash tier. He doesn't belong in the game. Roadhog should never be meta in Grandmaster. Never. Not once. And that's a hero who's very mechanically difficult. Why? Because there's almost no nuance to his hero. Same thing goes with Moira. And I think like there needs to be some honesty here. Like, guys, we don't have the resources to rework every single hero right now. So we're just going to leave that hero to be in a not great state. You know, kind of like what they did with Roadhog. And then we'll get back to it later. But we don't have that communication. We don't have that clarity consistently enough. And I think that leads to frustration from both the community playing up against Moira, Roadhog, whatever players, and the Moira Roadhog community themselves, because they don't know what to expect. Am I supposed to be a competitive class, or am I not supposed to be a competitive class? Nobody knows.
Right.
It's a very, very good point.
Just a question to you. Would you agree, or like, what is your perspective on the fact that certain characters can only really kind of show their depth in a more coordinated environment? So, for example, with the Roadhog changes, what I think Blizzard is doing, I have no idea what they're doing, but what I think they're doing is they want to kind of turn him, like his hook, less into a solo flank one-shot people ability, and the idea to be more like, I'm going to hook someone into my team, and then my team is going to mess them up. But that's something that you're not really going to get in ranked. That's something that the majority of the player base is not really going to experience. Or if you look at Symmetra's TP or Mei Wall, Mei in scrims is like a different character. They might as well just rename her, you know, compared to what you would do to her in solo queue. So I'm kind of interested to hear, just not just from you, but kind of from the group. You know, should characters have kits that can't really be fully expressed outside of a very coordinated environment?
I think there's definitely abilities. I think teleport is a big one where, you know, there have been situations, there have even been metas. What was at the end of season 2 where we had the Symmetra Bastion meta, anti-goats briefly. And obviously these big TP strats on 2CP, like Awkward was saying, it required coordination to do that. But I don't think that even heroes like, for example, you could make a very good argument that, Winston gets a lot lower value in lower ranks because there's not as much coordination. But a good Winston's still going to climb. A good Winston can turn around, hey, my teammates are there. If I jump in, they're probably going to shoot the enemies in some way, shape, or form, so there'll probably be some form of follow-up. So I don't think we have too many abilities or too many heroes that demand team follow-up, as opposed to increase the odds. Like there's a decent chance if I'm Roadhog right now and I hook somebody, that there will be some form of follow-up or some form of enemy response that allows my team to win the fight. So I agree with it. There's definitely like abilities and heroes that benefit more from coordination, but even like a Sombra, for example. But the number one problem, as you and I both know, when we coach a Sombra player, my team never follows up. Coach the Sombra player, turns out they're hacking the enemy while the team's in spawn. Or they're hacking the enemy when they're on the high ground and their teammates can't follow up. And it's usually a problem with the player itself with a lack of follow-up, not with the hero, if that makes sense.
Yeah. My perspective would probably be that there can be abilities like that are like, this is pretty much only valuable in coordinated play. But then there has to be an honest conversation about it. And I don't think we'll ever get that, because it's at odds with the fantasy of what Overwatch, the experience of playing Overwatch solo queue is, which is the number one consumption of the game. The target audience is someone solo queuing Overwatch or playing with a couple friends for fun. And that is at odds with having an ability that like Teleporter, which requires inherent coordination, and also saying anyone can play whatever they want to. You want to main Symmetra? Go main Symmetra. Like, have fun, play as much as you want, climb as much as you want. That is Overwatch. Play your hero. But then that's at odds with like a hero that, and I think this is where like whenever I see heroes like this, when people are frustrated, it's usually this, and tanks have this a lot because people play like Reinhardt and they'll be like, well, I do all this space making for my team and then they never follow up. Like, what is the point, man? And of course, like the answer is, well, actually you should just YOLO. Like you should just forget about your team, go straight into the backline and go YOLO with the Reinhardt. Like that is the way. But then they're also not wrong to say, well, that's kind of dishonest, isn't it? Is that not that's not what the hero is supposed to be? You advertise this as a big shield protector, man, and you're telling me to just like YOLO throw my hammer like I'm fucking Thor in the backline. Like what's going on? So it's difficult. I think Overwatch has a lot to balance. It always does. Like not literally balance, like a lot to juggle. And the audience expectations of like your average person tuning in for the weekend versus an esport is always going to cause these like problems to crop up, like these odd scenarios to crop up where these heroes are left in the dust, because how do you make Mei both viable for Joe Blogs and for Overwatch League? Or not even viable, but like that part of her kit to be applicable almost in the same way. I'm curious, Awkward, if you have any thoughts on this.
I personally think that Blizzard is Overwatch as a whole is a false advertisement. They advertise a 5-on-5 team game. The first thing when you queue up to a game, the last thing you have to think about is your team, what they're picking, what they're playing, who is this guy, who is that guy. You shouldn't care. You play on your own. So in that sense, it's really false advertisement. Another point that I'd like to make about characters like Moira is that the problem with characters like Moira is because it doesn't teach you anything fundamental about the game. It doesn't teach you any positioning. It doesn't teach you any ability to play make. So people get stuck in the trap because I keep dying on Ana, so I'll swap to Moira. I'll have a get out of jail free card, and then they learn nothing about the game, and then they get stuck, and then they feel frustrated. So the character inherently is trapping people in a very low rank. And even if you do good and then you swap, you're still gonna suck at the other characters. A good Ana player will be a good Moira player. A good Moira player will be a very bad Ana player. So I think in that sense, that's why the character design is really, really poor. And yeah, that's my point.
I'm going to get so many bombs from Moira players in the comment section. I promise. There's so many Moira players going to be upset. But I think it's an interesting point. I kind of want to let any of you guys vibe off that, but before we kind of move on to actually discussions of some of the recent changes they've made, actually specifically.
Reviving or reaction to recent changes?
Any
Which one? Okay.
well, I'm saying if you want to vibe now, go ahead, and then we'll
Sure. Okay. So I think you made an interesting point, and you're the guy to talk to about it because you've talked about the rock paper scissors tank matchup, the ultimate swaps, and things like that. Going back to what Akra was saying with the team game environment, it's a game that says, "Oh, it's about swapping," but isn't. And then even if it is, do we really like that? Do we really enjoy? Again, I had a conversation I had last week with Boger, and it's like, there's nothing worse than going, oh, I play Winston, oh, they go Reaper, Diva. Okay, we're going to go those heroes. All right, they're putting in, half the effort that I'm going to inevitably end up on Orisa or whatever else. And I think that's where it's like, I guess I don't know the answer. Do we really like the rock, paper, scissors of tank swapping and DPS swapping? I think definitely the importance of swapping is a little bit overblown. I think you just need to get good at the hero that you're playing. However, advertising that as an aspect of the game and then also realizing that's actually not that much fun. I don't like being bullied off of Winston when he's a very high skill hero, or I don't like picking Zenyatta. Oh, now they go Sombra, now they're spawn camping me and I'm in plat. I don't know what to do. Like that's not exactly fun. So it's hard to know. And even like you were saying, the Reinhardt example, like how do you play Reinhardt? Well, there's this idea that you protect your team. And to be honest, that's not necessarily the bronze or silver's player's fault. That's a lot of how the hero is described or even demonstrated in the shorts, and how even back in Overwatch 1, there were a lot of, but that's even, I would even argue back in Overwatch 1, that's not how you was ever played. You took space. Your shield was for you, not for your team. But then who's going to tell them that? Obviously that's why I that's my job, right? That's ioStux's job. That's what Awkward's job is. But it shouldn't have to be that way. I mean, this goes into the training range and the practice and the onboarding for new players is horrible. But I think overall, sometimes it's like Overwatch does do a lot of false advertising. It isn't really a super great team game where I think the majority of the team play is more of awareness of what your team is doing and trying to synchronize it, but not necessarily really helping them, just doing your own thing at the same time. And then also even the way that a lot of the heroes or the way game functions isn't really exactly what we want. Do we want rock, paper, scissors tank? Do we want a Reinhardt shielding his backline? No, I don't know that we necessarily want that. So I don't know. Anyway, that's my thought.
I think a quick hot take, maybe, but I genuinely believe that Overwatch is impossible to balance. There are so many dials and new characters and there's just so many, things interacting with each other that it really doesn't matter what Blizzard does. No human being, honestly, I think even in terms of like AI and machine learning, it's going to take decades to even, get to a point where a game as complex as Overwatch can really be balanced. If you take a look at chess, like chess engines that figure out what the most optimal plays are still evolving. And that game is very, very old, right? So I guess a question that I have is, is creating a balanced game even, possible? Is that even kind of the goal that Blizzard should go for? Or should the goal just be to make sure that every character is like at least viable and to make changes frequently enough that by the time that people discover a meta, the patch, basically gets rid of that meta, and basically saying, oh, well, it doesn't matter if there are overpowered characters, if by the time people discover them and how to abuse that, we'll have changed the game already.
I'm going to let Awkward respond. I have a response, but I'm going to let Awkward respond to that.
I do agree that Overwatch is a very, very hard game to balance. I've put some thought into it myself, but then you have to consider, what would this change? How would this lead up to me needing to change this guy and this guy and this character and this hero, whatever? I don't know if it's impossible, but if you look at MOBA games, there's significantly more characters than Overwatch, and they do a pretty good job. So I do think, and also I do think there's a thin line between, the game is not so balanced, and this character has been OP for months, across all ranks. And I think that's a line that needs to be considered. The patch balances and general balances are really not fast enough. And that approach of balancing more often, I do think it's a better solution than what we have now.
I 100% agree. I think really the best thing to kind of tackle balance issues in Overwatch is to worry less about like each individual patch and just being more responsive and responding to OP characters quicker. And just, where's the experimental tab? Why does that not exist anymore? Just Blizzard being more communicative about their changes. Like, for example, in the in the recent patch notes, right? They made a change to I think it was Cassidy, and they made two changes, right? They changed his damage fall off so that it starts at 25 meters instead of 20. And they changed that he can now combat roll through enemies. Like, it doesn't get blocked by their hitbox anymore, right? And they left a comment, and it explained that, combat rolling into enemies wasn't fun. But they didn't even talk about the damage fall off change, which, like, that's the main. Who cares that you can combat roll through enemies? Like, nice, I guess. But like, those 5 meters are huge, and they didn't elaborate on that change at all, saying, oh, we want him to be more competitive with Ashe or something. Like, that would have been enough. But I think we need more frequent balance changes. And I would personally like it if Blizzard was, went a little bit more in depth, explaining why they are making certain changes.
I think I have the answer. And the answer is that the truth would not be popular. I think that's the answer. Is that if they were fully transparent about why they were making certain decisions, people would riot. Which is that there are considerations beyond balance that are the reasons they make certain changes. And that again goes back to like why my philosophy on Overwatch has shifted so much, because I kind of learned to internalize that rather than look at a change and kind of be like, this is inexplicable. Like, this doesn't make any sense. Like, it's just weird. But then you kind of have to remember, oh wait, maybe it's not about balance actually. Maybe it's just about like play rate, like play percentage, like how many people are playing this hero. Like, oh, we want more people to play this hero, we want less people to we want this hero to be less popular because it's being played so much, or stuff like that, right? So it's one of those situations, and I think this leads nicely onto the Mercy discussion, which I'm curious a little bit. I don't want to wade too deep in the Mercy waters before accusations come that none of you guys are Mercy players, we've shit talking us for. But I think that's a good example of like, it's confusing. I actually feel bad for Mercy players because I'm like, this is a really confusing change because they said we want to start. Like, I think this is like one area where actually there's large agreement, and somehow this change has come and fucked all of it, which is that I feel, and I spoke, we had a specific podcast for this. We had the Great Mercy Debate. I spoke to Mercy players, and they were like, yeah, what we really like is the movement. The movement is what the fun part of Mercy is. The movement is why we play Mercy. Yeah, the res, like some of us don't like the res, some of us don't like the blue beam. We're all okay with potentially losing the res, potentially losing the blue beam if it comes at the cost of something else. But the movement, that's us, bro. That's us. In comes Blizzard, and everyone knows the worst scenario of it is the pocket playstyle. Everyone hates the pocket playstyle. Everyone dislikes going up against someone and they have a Mercy attached to them. The Mercy's around the corner. You can never kill that guy. That guy blows your head off. What am I supposed to do? Especially considering everything we spoke about being a solo game where your job is like you're in the game and you're like, I want to win this game for myself. All of a sudden you're in a 2v1 because that's just how Mercy operates. And now you can't even if you were way better than that guy, you can't overcome that skill. Like, you can't overcome that disadvantage. So we have all this is the context, and then Blizzard comes along. They're like, here are these changes, dog. Like, this is going to really prevent Mercy pocketing. And it's like, actually, so you removed her ability to move around, which means she's not going to move around as much. And now you made it so that one person she's pocketing is harder to kill if she's pocketing that person. And now, because the healing kicks in harder at half HP, you're incentivized to damage boost them for longer because, like, the benefit of healing them from half HP is better. So, like, every part of that change makes it harder to do what they said they were going to do. So it feels very confusing, and I don't know if that's a case of, like, that is one area where I don't think it's like, oh, they actually want that, like, there's a nefarious, deeper purpose. I feel like that one is just it misses the mark. But I'm curious to your guys' POV. I know Spilo, you kind of had some thoughts on this.
Yeah, I think this is something that I think I try to avoid being the negative Nancy. I think it's really easy to, especially to farm views and just, Blizzard sucks, they're trash, and we don't always fully understand the context. And I think, be healthily skeptical, but be respectful. But I will say that the one thing that I think Blizzard has shown a really poor or great, depending on your point of view, track record on is pulling what I call the Blizzard classic, which is seeing a problem and misdiagnosing why the problem actually exists. And I'm not sure why that's the case, but that has been the case with them for some time. And I'm even going back to Goat's meta. Goat's meta, over sustain, objective pressure was too long, the stacking of all these things. And what did they do? Well, they kept buffing Reaper and May. And anybody who played anywhere near the pro meta knew Reaper and May weren't going to break Goat's meta. It was just never going to happen. And then what happens is they finally go, okay, fine, we give up. We 2-2-2. And that's what the oppressively strong DPS that everybody's playing, Reaper and May. This was even back as soon as this year with the Junker Queen meta in Overwatch League, and everybody panicked because we don't want Overwatch 2 going live with this brawly, unfun, nobody taking angles, DPS duels meta. So what we're going to do is we're going to take Junker Queen, Lucio, Sojourn, Genji, like the 4 heroes that we played, and then we got Brig, who's the weakest hero, and we're going to nerf Brig and Spire. And everyone's like, wait, what? Brig is not the reason why that composition was played. It was strictly Junker Queen shout and only Junker Queen shout, and then obviously Sojourn's overtune and things like that. But that's the Blizzard classic. And then we look at these Mercy changes right here, right? The Mercy, like, oh, Mercy's a problem, and like you said, we're going to make the hero less fun. We're going to make the hero maybe even weak, but we never actually addressed the core issues of why she's frustrating to play against. And there's a lot of changes in these that I think don't do a great job of that. For example, the Wrecking Ball changes. I love I think the shields was a great thing for increasing uptime. I think the reduction on the slam was also good for increasing uptime. Things that Ball had issues with, especially in Overwatch 2, without giving him the ability to one shot. But I don't understand the Mines buff. I don't think Mines was ever a weak part of his kit. It did its job. It wasn't exactly a fight winner every time, but it was fine. So it's like we're constantly looking at things and saying, oh, this hero is too strong, so we're going to nerf it, but we're going to nerf the part so that the hero is still frustrating to play against and the people playing the hero are upset. We've made nobody happy. I think that's the Blizzard classic, and that's what I would like to see changed. I don't know why that's the issue, but that happens a lot. Oh, another one. The Orisa ability to kill at range was definitely a problem. So I get the 25 to 15 meter range. But are you going to do that over her survivability? I don't understand that, because the gun range is what made her more interesting to play. Me having Fortify and being never headshot, never killable, that I don't understand. It's like seeing a hero is strong and then nerfing the fun part of her kit. I don't understand that.
Yeah,
that's my rant.
No, I think it's a good one and awkward. I'm curious to your thoughts. Again, you're a support veteran. You've probably seen some of these changes as well. And what are your thoughts been?
Well, the first thing I'd like to address is that, Spilo says keep it respectful. And I agree, you have to keep it respectful. Your feedback has to be respectful. But at the end of the day, you're paying for a product. Let's say I came to get coached by SVB, for example, and he tells me, awkward, you're shit at the game, takes my money and leaves. I have all the rights to be mad. I have all the rights to be upset.
You just described an SVB coaching session right there. Thank you very much. Thanks for your patronage.
And I have all the rights to criticize him being horrible, for example, right? So, but I do think that Blizzard lack of understanding the game is just due to lack of being competent in general. You say that there's a lot of things behind the scene, and I surely agree, but I think there's a spot where you can make everyone happy and still gain what you're trying to gain. I think they're just being lazy. They just don't know what they're doing. I feel like Blizzard are just a bunch of gold players who have no idea what makes a hero good, what makes a hero bad. It's almost like the person who makes pen pretends to be the painter. It's I think they just need to let the people who know what they're talking about give actual feedback about the game. And all of these gold players are saying, hey, but you don't understand the gold experience. Well, first of all, I do. What I'm suggesting to be changed, it's not and for top 500. The character should be changed fundamentally so you and I, both gold and top 500, can enjoy it. I think that it's not always gold against good player, like the best elite players, you know? It could be a mutual handshake.
You hit all the bingo cards there, Awkward. So I'm glad to hear it. I'm curious.
Can I say one thing really fast?
Yeah, go ahead.
Really fast. Okay, so I will say this, that sometimes pro player feedback sucks, really sucks. So I want to take Awkward's feedback and ioStux's feedback and just say we need to bring the experimental patch back. Bring it back. We could do excessive, crazy, maybe over the top, egregious. We can actually take pro players' advice and just plug it right in. People will play it, reward with loot boxes, run the numbers. I feel like that was always like the most healthy way of testing things, because it wasn't just about what was actually balanced, but it was also about what was actually fun, you know? And like, I think especially in a casual pro game, but mostly casual game that is Overwatch, you also have to find out what's actually fun. And like, wow, this is actually a really cool change. I never would have thought of that. And there's no downside to it, right? We're not ruining the game for 3 or 4 weeks because we overtuned this hero. That's my opinion anyway.
I'll just feedback off that, which is obviously I had the chance to talk to Jared and John recently, and I did ask them about the experimental, and it wasn't on their radar for the time being. So I wouldn't expect, because I asked them about the workshop. Experimental workshop obviously came back season 3, but experimental is not currently on their priority list, and that is obviously, this is again the balancing act, right? It's not. I understand where Awkward's coming from, but it's also like, you know, we say lazy. I think that's a dangerous term to use, because most often it's usually a resource issue, right? It's like how many people have the time to be able to dedicate to the thing that we think is essential, but maybe some guy higher up the chain is saying is not essential. And I imagine experimental is one of those where it's like, might be lots of people in the dev team who think, yeah, actually the experimental would be a good thing to bring back, but then when you look at the priority list, it might be quite low down, and they're like, no, you know, I don't think experimental is gonna do all that for the game. And that's like the reality of it. But yeah, I'm curious, ioStux, any thoughts on what's been discussed there?
Okay, we're gonna go full circle here. So we talked about this earlier. If you want to improve, you need to be willing to like try stuff out and kind of push the limits a little, and you can't be afraid of messing things up. And I think experimental was just brilliant because it allowed Blizzard to put in these super wacky changes, and they were just immune, because they didn't need to worry about them breaking ranked or breaking the game or anything. It was just experimental. It was just for feedback. And then if it passed that test, then they could, you know, actually do things. So I think that they need to be like unnecessarily conservative in their balancing, because there is no iteration on the patches. It's not like they actively communicate, as Awkward said, like they actively communicate with pros or with coaches or whatever. They just make the changes, they push them to live, and then they need to hope that their game is still alive a week later. And you know, people just haven't left. So, you know, I don't know if a Blizzard employee is ever going to see this, but I think that experimental is just such a great way to experiment with changes that otherwise just wouldn't be possible. And maybe a certain character just needs a very dramatic change that, you know, just can't be pushed to live immediately and needs to be experimented on. So those are kind of my thoughts on experimental. And then the second thing is kind of going back to the Mercy changes. So my personal interpretation of the Mercy changes is actually a little bit different. So the way that I personally interpret the change where you heal more when the target is below 50% HP is that Mercy's identity is this, ultimately are her wings, in my opinion. Like when I think of Mercy, I think of movement, you know, just flying all over the place. And I think what that change was meant to do, or what Blizzard was thinking, is that, okay, if she can heal people below 50% faster, then instead of just pocketing one person and kind of staying with them forever, she can kind of fly like, oh, someone is critical there, I'm going to top them off real quick, and then I'm going to top this guy off, and kind of alternating, because theoretically that's going to give her the most healing per second, that's going to get her ultimate the fastest. But then in that same patch, they say, oh, you know, we want to incentivize you, you know, to kind of alternate between players and be a little bit more of a reactive emergency healer rather than a proactive, I'm just pocketing this one person. But then we're giving you a huge cooldown on your GA, you know? So I think that the changes are like I honestly think that the balancing team just, I don't think they talk enough with each other. I think that they, maybe have different ideas of like what the different characters' identities are or what direction they want to move in, which ultimately results in patches that just are kind of self-conflicting and that either go against the character's identity or where one balance change just goes against another balance change.
I mean,
Something that
go ahead,
I'd
Walker.
like to address is that some games, for example, let's take Counter-Strike. Valve has a workshop where everybody could make a map, everybody could make a skin, and sometimes the company that chooses throughout all the people that are making, they choose something to implement in the game. Now, I feel like the workshop right now that like Overwatch has is pretty not that great. I feel like it could save them a lot of time and resources because I think that a lot of people would do it even for free, like create maps in the workshop, and maybe Blizzard can see, okay, look, this map is cool, has a lot of votes, a lot of people who voted for it. Maybe we can implement this map. Some people will suggest, okay, let's build a character. Some guy just decides to build a character in Overwatch. Maybe Blizzard will find it a cool concept and see what they can work with. So when I'm saying lazy, I think they are not using their resource enough. I think there's more reach that needs to be had. I feel like there's zero communication. And also I agree that most pro players, we cannot give you normal advice or normal like structural advice of how to make the game better or how to make balance better. But I'm sure that a lot of people do. And that's why a lot of feedback is important. That's why experimental was good in the first place. So I generally don't understand where the communication is. Why are they not communicating? Why are they not asking? Why are they not building platforms where random people can build maps, build characters, build whatever they want, and maybe people will like it?
Well,
I'm sorry. I just want to mention this real quick because I saw it in chat and I think it's so good. Someone wrote that the reason Blizzard doesn't want a good workshop is because of Dota. And who knows, maybe if the workshop was like actually really good, someone is going to come up with like an amazing game mode that's just going to steal Overwatch's player base.
Well, this is actually something I wanted to respond to anyways, which is to Awkward's point. Again, the answer is going to be the same. It's about resource like management. And firstly, on the Dota issue, they already actually solved this from their own end, because when for context, again, anyone who doesn't know what we're talking about, Dota, the whole MOBA genre, invented in a Warcraft 3, one of Blizzard's games, in the custom game. You could make custom games and had a map editor in Warcraft 3. They made Dota Defense of the Ancients. It was a popular, like, essentially the way you play modes in the workshop right now. I don't know, 5 Mercies, 1 Reinhardt. There was Dota back then, and it became essentially more popular than the base game itself, spawned the entire genre, and now we have League of Legends and Dota. Problem was, Blizzard didn't capitalize on it quickly enough. They let it just sit there as part of their custom games. Eventually, League of Legends, Riot made League of Legends with the same idea, and then Valve made Dota with the developer IceFrog who made Dota. And Blizzard missed the boat. By the time they made Heroes of the Storm, it was too late, because they didn't have any legal right over the game mode itself. Actually, they solved this issue when they made Warcraft 3 Reforged. They actually put in a clause which upset the community wildly, but said anything made in Warcraft 3 Reforged in the custom game belongs to Blizzard. So they already addressed, like, basically anything made, and I'm sure this, I don't know if I've read this, what the thingy for it is in Overwatch, but I would hazard that if they were to ever to implement a map editor, they would almost certainly implement at the same time, if it doesn't already have, that anything made in the map editor with Overwatch belongs to Blizzard, and they reserve the right to kind of do with that IP what they will. Again, I think the answer why they have not done that is from the dev perspective. You got to understand, it almost it's a really bad look to say that our way of like putting resources into our game is to let other people make stuff. Right? To say we're going to spend months of dev time to enable other people to make stuff in our game instead of putting out a hero. Because it really is, it's like a either or situation. It's like there's only so many devs working on so many things. So the map editor coming out for Overwatch, which would be great, don't get me wrong, I think it would be amazing. I think it would like blow minds for how much Overwatch works. But that, again, it's like the corporate ideology of it would be, okay, but then we're not putting out a hero for like a season, maybe 2 seasons. Like they don't put out a hero. Community is mad. Community will then say, and again, the casual community will probably engage with the map editor anyways. They won't engage with the arcade mode probably anyways. So they're going to look at it and say, well, I came for the new heroes. I came for the new content. You didn't give me that. I'm out. Peace. They're not necessarily going to be like, oh, but we got the map editor and look at all the fun maps people are making now, right? That maybe is a long-term benefit, but in the short term it hurts. And if there's one thing we know about, gigantic stock market AAA companies, is that they prioritize the short term over everything else. So I think that's basically your answer, Awkward, for like why don't they just put out the map editor? Because it would come at the cost of 2 heroes and some good skins or something, and that's something they're not willing to do.
Fair enough.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I just think it would be too much of like a kind of a long-term investment, and I think that's Blizzard has just kind of garnered so much kind of development depth at this point, where with every patch they release, they just need to think about more stuff, and certain things become more outdated. So I'm personally a little bit concerned about, how sustainable, the active development of Overwatch is going to be. And that's kind of there's like a little devil on my shoulder that actually really roots for Overwatch's monetization to work and for people to just spend a bunch of money on like 20 euro skins. Because I personally think that, Overwatch in its current form needs significantly more resources than it gets right now to really catch up, and kind of fix most of the issues that it has.
Go ahead and elaborate on that. Like in what way? You just want like more devs, more time?
Well, so there's kind of two sides to this, right? So on one hand, you need to create new content because ultimately that's what brings people in, right? New maps, new heroes, etc. Right? But then, as Awkward, mentioned earlier, some maps, could use a rework. Like they've brought Numbani back this season, and Numbani First Point is still just terribly designed, right? But creating a patch and saying, hey guys, so we changed Numbani First Point, that's not as exciting as like, guys, we made a map with a penguin. So I think that if Blizzard has more resources, then they don't need to kind of compromise, they can dedicate time to reworking old characters, changing up the maps, communicating more with the pro scene, pro coaches in terms of balancing, investing more time into internal playtesting, maybe even inviting pro players for regular internal playtesting, right? Those are all great things that just require a lot of time and resources. And I feel like Overwatch 1 was kind of in this vicious cycle where, because it was just a buy once game, they just got a lot of money at the start and then they could just develop the game a lot. But then over time, it just wasn't as profitable, and Overwatch League wasn't as profitable maybe as they have liked. So now with the transition to the free-to-play model, every single piece of content they create is money. Like I'm gonna admit it, I spent 10 euros to get that Bee Mercy skin. Because I just need that in my life. And that's money that ultimately Blizzard can use to pay a designer, to maybe take a look at a map and move a box around or add an extra flank route or something. So that's kind of my perspective, where I think the more resources they have, the more content they can create, and that's ultimately what we need.
I also like to add on the maps topic is that Blizzard could get immediate feedback on what maps they should change if they just put a voter on what map people want to play, 5-on-5, get into a match. Okay, let's vote what maps we want to play, what maps we don't want to play. Nobody wants to play Havana, nobody wants to play Colosseo, nobody wants to play New Queen Street, and you'll see, nobody plays those modes. So why the fuck did we make them in the first place? Time for a change. At least it boils down to what maps need to be reworked. Because a lot of maps have a lot of problems. I can name you each problem on each map fairly easily, which again makes me question the competence of the people that are making the map or changing the maps. If I'm an individual, can tell you exactly what it is that is wrong with the map, what point needs to be changed, and why. How come a company can't do it?
I think if we had map votes, yes, that would probably give them a lot of data about which maps are most popular. But I feel like, it already, like last season, it kind of felt like we were just playing Colosseo over and over and over and over again. I feel like if map votes come in, even if only the best maps get voted, we'll just kind of get sick of them after a while. Like, I love King's Row, I don't want to play it like 10 times in a row.
Sorry for cutting you off there, but it's the reason why it felt so bad is because they were shoving these maps down our throats, but nobody wanted to play them, So at least you can say, okay, majority voted for it, so we can play this. Nobody should feel sad about it. It's a majority vote. But when I play Colosseo and nobody wants to play that mode, everybody's in comms saying, what the fuck, I don't know the map. It's a shit map. I hate this map. Well, no shit that people are not going to like it.
Well, there's sort of 2 points to that, and I'm starting to feel like the bad guy here, but I think point A would be, again, in the model of like, well, new content is the best in terms of just player engagement, right? Like the best thing you can do for the game is make new stuff rather than better stuff, I guess. That's the model we live in, right? It's like new stuff over stuff that's better, like balanced stuff that's better. In that scenario, again, it's like, why would you spend ages making a map only for people to not play it? And especially because you want new and casual players to come in and play it. And if that's getting banned out, let's say, that would be bad, that your new content is now gone. Like people are not getting to access your new content. Secondly, I think the devs might argue that the players don't always know what's best for them, because I think the number one demonstration would be the gaslight movement of bring back 2CP, of a swathe of players who've truly convinced themselves that 2CP was what we need in our lives and that they missed 2CP. And I wonder if like they would say, well, if we gave you map votes, you guys would do something like that, where you would like, you know, you'd gaslight yourselves into just playing these maps, then you'd hate them, and then you'd be like, bring back those other maps that we missed, and then, you know, you'd it's, I guess the dev POV is like, it's almost better that we just tell you, like, we just give you, we decide, like, you guys play this, and we can rotate it at our pace rather than like let you guys fuck it up, basically.
It depends on like who you're trying to cater to as well. You know, like we play a really awkward game for like, I mean, we think about a game, we're talking about MOBAs, right? Age of Empires 2, one of the greatest games of all time, arguably, phenomenally balanced even to this day. Has a remarkably consistent and competitive pro scene, constantly updated, constantly balanced. Just a great game, right? But if I'm talking to, you know, 15-year-old, somebody new to gaming, maybe somebody a little bit older, my first suggestion isn't going to be to try out Age of Empires 2, right? Even with the PvE and casual side of things, that's not a game that caters very well to that. So the game doesn't cater to that when it's designed. You know, it doesn't. We don't care if there's an easy civ for you to pick up. You get good or you play PvE. Those are your options. Overwatch tries to do everything. I think it tries to check all the boxes. It's casual, it's competitive, it's PvE, it's PvP. You know, it's great for fun for bronze players. It's great fun for top 500 players. It's Overwatch League. It's bronze, and it really struggles to figure out where its identity is. You know, do we want more? And if this even goes back to balance, right? Do we want Moira to be a trash tier hero? Well, how many of the casual community will be upset? I mean, we have hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of Mercy mains who love the hero design, and you know, they make a lot of money off of every single new Mercy skin. So if you take those people off, you're not making money. If you're not releasing new, I mean, that's part of the reason why Overwatch 1 died, like ioStux was saying, is there just was nothing. There was nothing for years. No communication, no Nova. And the game was actually pretty well balanced, but there was nothing. You know, there was actually nothing. So of course the game was dead, even though it was relatively well balanced. So to me, it's about, you have to find where do we fall on that spectrum? How important is the pro player, the top 500 GM player? How important is the bronze, silver, gold player? I think you should try to balance more for the higher ranks, but you can't just balance for the higher ranks. And I think that's where it becomes as what am I trying to say? It becomes a goal of trying to find what are the low-hanging fruits. As a casual player, what do casual players love? I'm an idiot. I don't know. I could probably guess it's probably a new hero, new skin, new game mode, something fun. They're going to like that. So that needs to be their priority, is something along those lines. What do pro players? Well, I have probably a better idea of what that is. Better communication and more frequent and more aggressive balance changes. And then, like Awkward was saying, some of these major map issues, like, for example, Colosseo, remove the glass. Remove the glass on the robot. The map is, first fight is all of a sudden significantly better. That's all it takes. Just remove the glass. The glass is not part of the identity of the map. Remove the glass. And so when I'm a pro player and that just continues to be a horrifically designed map and nothing is done, and it feels like that's such an easy fix and I don't hear anything about it, that's where I think people get tucked off. Kiriko Sojourn, meta for months, and yet now we're going to do a little tidbit there. That to me is where the low-hanging fruit line is crossed to me. I'm not angry that Orisa was meta for a little period of time. She was a little overtuned. She got her nerfs. She's probably not going to be as meta right now. Okay, we're good. But I think a lot of pro players were right to be irritated at the Kiriko and Sojourners because, or the lack of aggressive Sojourners, because that was where I think the line process from we're being nitpicky, nothing is ever going to be perfect, we have to balance between casual and pro, and for crying out loud, this is absurd, if that makes any sense. And I think that's where we have to find the balance there. What are the most egregious issues that are affecting pro players and casuals, and try and address those first. And that's where, even though as a community we don't always know what we want, generally most people can probably agree that those objectively are good changes, and you see it because they do eventually get changed, but just at an unbelievably slow rate.
I think the main reason why balance changes are so irresponsive is because a lot of the consequences and effects that balance changes have, they affect win rate and pick rate kind of in a staggered way. So if Blizzard releases a nerf for Sojourn, for example, it doesn't even really matter what nerf it is. The pick rate is just going to decrease because some people think, oh, Sojourn got nerfed, I'm going to try picking up another character, right? Even though they didn't even put any thought into like the actual strength of the character. So then, they need to wait and see, over the next weeks after the change, how does that affect her win rate, right? And then now just imagine if it's not just one change, imagine if it's multiple changes affecting one character, right? Because the problem is that Overwatch is trying to balance a system based on statistics that are not very responsive. Win rate is not super responsive. Pick rate is not it's not, the correlation just isn't always there. So instead of quantitatively based balancing, where they just look at getting each number as close to 50% as possible, ultimately the question should be, okay, is our game right now fun? What is fun? What is not fun? Oh, getting one shot by Sojourn is not super fun. Okay, how can we remove that, without making the character herself, less fun to play, right? So not relying so much on, statistics and kind of living in this ideal world where you can just look at numbers and balance a game by looking at spreadsheets, but actually understanding the players, both talking with pro players as well as seeing what the casual players think, and instead of trying to just get numbers to where they want them to be, trying to aim for an experience where everyone can just say, okay, maybe this game isn't perfectly balanced, but like I'm having fun, this guy's having fun, and it just needs to be balanced enough to where people don't quit the game, because I'm going to be honest, I would consider myself a pretty casual player right now. Balance is like important to me to a certain extent, but as long as nothing is just ludicrously broken, Blizzard can get me back each season with a new map. If there's with a new hero, I'm just going to play the game just based on that. I have a friend who is a huge Widowmaker a fan, and honestly, when the last season came out, the Widow skin was amazing, and like that alone honestly was just reason enough to kind of come back to the game and just have fun. So I think it's important to think of balance less as just a numbers game, but more so how it affects the overall gameplay experience that people have and optimizing for that.
I do think player perception is really important when it comes to balance. Because stuff tends to be sticky. People want to play Kiriko even though Ana may be technically better. So sometimes you kind of have to give the perception of, guys, you don't have to play Kiriko anymore. Even if, I don't know. I agree with Stux. I think the numbers only, the impression that we've been getting is that they balance strictly off of win rates and stats. And I think that kind of turns people off a little bit.
And really quick, then I'm sorry for talking so much. Actually, I think Goats was a perfect example of this, because Goats got so deep that it was just kind of a self, like an Ouroboros just circling in on itself. Because Goats was played so much that teams have like invested so many resources into perfecting that one comp that, quite frankly, like we've kind of reached a point at the end where nerfing Goats didn't even really do anything, because it doesn't matter how shit Goats is. Investing time now to like learn new characters and learning new compositions, like it doesn't matter, because playing a bad, like technically badly performing comp really, really well because we've practiced it for 6 months, we're still going to beat those guys who've been playing Dive for 3 days, And I think that's also an issue with just balancing from a casual perspective, where certain changes, honestly, they just take time, especially bigger changes. Like Roadhog's playstyle now is completely different, and obviously he's not in a super good spot right now. But who knows, you know? Maybe someone is going to just figure out how to make the most of that kit, and then we look at this balance change completely differently.
Yeah, I think I want to hear Awkward's take on all this because we've gone on for a while. Awkward, anything you want to?
I think that it's you need numbers and statistics. They need context behind them. So why are the people picking this much? Why? I feel like the changes are purely off statistics, just like ioStux and Spilo said. But there's no context as to why people play this, as to why the pick rate's so high, why the pick rate's so low. There are a lot of things that need to be changed about the game, and I want to address one character specifically. Now, I would like to talk about Widow because Widow is a very, very common thing that rises up. I was personally a believer, and I still do, that if you die to a Widow, it sounds like a skill issue. It's a you issue. You could have played it better, right? But when I coach a lot of people and I watch them play against a Widow across all ranks, everybody all of a sudden play differently just because she exists in the server. Doesn't matter if it's a bronze Widow that is not going to hit the shot ever in her life, or it's the best Widow you have seen in your life. Everybody just plays differently. So now the idealistic approach is what, let's teach everybody how to play against Widow, but then comes it's like kind of there comes a thing where you can say, you know what, if everyone is having issues, instead of doing the hard work and teaching them how to play against that character, maybe we'll just change it so it will be more comfortable for people to play against. That's why Soldier was so oppressive, for example. Soldier in the server, everybody start running around like headless chicken. They forget their fundamentals. They don't know what they're doing. They don't know what they want to do. They just cry all the time. I got one shot, whatever. But something needs to be changed about it.
Yeah, I think it's like a really good level of nuance as well. Like one other thing I wanted to chime in personally was like what kind of frustrated me when they did, you know, I'm glad they are communicating more. Like they did that little talk with Seagull, and it was nice to hear from them. But when they showed that graph of like Sojourn and Hog and stuff, one thing that frustrated me was like them being like, hey, look, the win rate fell. And I was kind of sat there like, well, yeah, no shit, you nerfed the character. Like, so of course all the people who play the character are going to be worse at the character. Like, is this not like a basic of what the win rate, like, should not this be basically accounted for? That like you nerf a character, people who potentially farmed hundreds, especially when a character's been left for a long time, like Sojourn had, like, people have farmed potentially hundreds of SR off this character. Now you made the character weaker, people worse at character. Like, this is surely basic logic. So it is a little bit frustrating when they and they will emphasize, we do more than just numbers, guys. We do more than just numbers. We talk about player feel. We take all this into account. But it's frustrating, I think, when you're already questioning the decision, and then the justification after that is like, oh, but the numbers say this, and you're like, well, then the numbers are meaningless because they're not telling you the right thing. So yeah,
there's no context.
No, it doesn't. Yeah, or not the right context. Right? It's like stats can be misleading. I think sometimes people think that like stats are objective, but like any stat used selectively can lead you to a wrong conclusion, right? And I think being like, oh, the win rate is down, it means we nerfed her too much. It's like, no. And they kind of acknowledged it themselves. They were like, oh, sometimes it takes a while for win rates to level out after we change a character. Like Orisa, we changed her. People were bad at her to start with in Overwatch 2, and then later people realized how to play her. And it's like, yeah, why can't you see that for Sojourn also? That like when you nerf her, people will be bad at her for a while until they figure out, okay, this is how we play Sojourn now. Or Roadhog, people will figure out how to play Roadhog eventually. Give them a little bit of time, and they'll figure out, okay, this is how we play Roadhog now that I can't perma flank in the backline and one-shot squishy so easily, right? Like, okay, now I got to play him different. So, and the one other point I want to add, because before we can start, I know I've taken a lot of you guys' time, so I'm going to start winding down here, but the one other point I wanted to add was that another reason why I don't think they balance as dynamically as before is, and they've kind of alluded to this, well, it takes them 2 weeks to lock in a build, right? So they said this themselves. They were like, well, look, we've got to lock in a build in advance, so we put in the change, then we see, then like, so let's say they've locked in 2 weeks beforehand, this is the change. In that 2 week time period, people are like, actually, we hate this now, Blizzard, change this now. Then the thing drops, it doesn't address the thing that we said we hate now, and now another 2 weeks later, it takes them, then the thing drops, then after 2 weeks more of that, they lock in a new build, and that's again 2 weeks staggered, so it's like this long chain of catching up to like, and all of it is really console's fault. So let's blame the console community for all this, because this is mostly a sort of certification problem with Microsoft and Sony. So it's one of those unfortunate realities. Again, the balancing after Overwatch. We want to be a game that's cross-platform, that everybody across the world plays, whether it's on the Nintendo Switch or on the $30,000 gaming PC that's like high end or whatever, right? All of those should be playing Overwatch, and all of those needs should be met, and that requires things like this to be a reality. And you know, I think sometimes we underestimate the scale of Overwatch, of like just how big it is, and what a machine it is. Like even to its what we thought was a dead game, it was still really popular in China, and that's sad to say right now because people can't play it in China.
Too soon.
Too real. But you know, this is the reality. It's like we forget that, like, just how popular the game is, and how many different kinds of people play it. So
I think that's where like casual players and pros can really focus on like I said, the low hanging fruits, just making that easier from like a developer standpoint, but like trying to choose our battles. You know what I'm saying? Are we going to sit here and cry that symmetric turrets are still AI and auto lock, and like it's just not the biggest priority right now, you know? So it's like you have to kind of, I think as a community, try and choose your battles. What's the most important thing as a casual or as a professional that's really bothering you? Is it the easy change that you can't believe that's happened? Is the Kiriko and Soju that have been meta for 4, 5, 6, however many months? That's where we need to be putting our attention to, and not screaming and complaining about all these little things like this and that. And it really, I think, choosing our battles as much as we can. I think Awkward's right that, you know, they are professionals. They need to do the job the way that it's supposed to be done. However, at the same time, because it's more of an art, we can provide as best as we possibly can accurate feedback by trying to really prioritize a sense of prioritization rather than just endlessly spewing noise, which may or may not be accurate. But, you know, what if you were to say, like, what are your biggest issues with Overwatch as a pro or as a casual? You would need to know that answer if you were to actually give feedback, I think.
100%. Any other thoughts you guys want to chime in on that front, Awkward or ioStux?
No, not for me.
Okay,
I think you guys hit the nail on the head. Yeah.
Okay, well, on that note, then I'm gonna start winding us down towards the end. Again, it's been a fantastic talk. So, and I always like to kind of end these with like a look to the future and something potentially a little bit optimistic. So I'm gonna kind of ask you guys then. You know, we've kind of got season 3 now, and it's been nice to see them experiment with a lot of things. I'm actually really surprised. With that being said about the 2-week thing, I'm really surprised they dropped the mercy changes as hard as they did, because like. It's so funny to see them dance around stuff like Kiriko and Sojourn, and then just kind of bring this really significant change to Mercy like all at once and just leave it there. But I wonder if that's also part of their plan to be like, you know what? People said no hero at season 3. Mercy's a new hero now. Off you go. Like go nuts, right? So I wonder if that's part of their strategy to kind of cause this sort of large discussion point so that we're feeling like there's something really pressing happening. But my question to you guys would be, well, what do you want to see in, let's say, the short to midterm as changes to Overwatch, like to please you personally? Like, what do you kind of want to see them shift? Is it like a specific balance stuff? Is it more macro stuff where you're like, I want them to start focusing on this more? Is it map design? Is it like, actually, I just want them to think about the map design and make them, you know, balance the maps like the way a Valorant would, where it's like every angle is thought about and every like sight line is calculated, right? So I'm gonna take it to ioStux first.
So first of all, I honestly think Overwatch 2 just does like a lot of things right. Obviously, we've been kind of, you know, crapping on them a little bit, but like overall, I like, especially with the way they've been communicating about matchmaking and map pools and whatever over the past, and you know, even them stating their intent to just completely get rid of map pools for season 4. I personally really like that. I think map pools are like nonsensical. I just want, you know, variety person. It's like not like CS where you need to practice specific smoke setups or something for each map. So honestly, you know, the more variety, the merrier, at least for me. Really, the only thing that I think is a priority is that right now the way that competitive is structured for the majority of the player base is just not a very, you know, motivating experience. You know, like they made the change to, you know, it only requiring five wins, but honestly, I think they're like still a little bit unsure. You know, they're kind of stuck on this new system. They don't just want to abandon it immediately. And honestly, I don't know what they need to do, but you know, I just want to have, you know, a ranked system that, you know, kind of works for everyone, where you have like continuous, like just a sense of progress and always something to look forward to. You know, because right now ranked is just, you know, you play games every once in a while, you know, you get a little boost mentally because you're ranked up. At the end, you can buy your 27th golden gun. which nobody even cares about. Like, why are there no other rewards by now? You get like a title. You can't even really flex with your rank because nobody can see your rank by default. Your profile is private. In the loading screen, there are no ranks anymore.
So I just an open queue, by the way.
But
you never
right,
see
yes.
500. You're like, yeah, it's open queue.
Yes,
yeah,
right. So honestly, I want like. When I started playing competitive games a long time ago, I played League for the first time, and I saw that loading screen border of like a challenger player. You know, that was like so like cool to me. You know, but like I personally just haven't. Maybe I'm getting old, but I just personally don't get that sense anymore. You know, in Overwatch, where I look at a top 500 player, and you know, instead of thinking, oh man, I'm playing with someone really good. You know, like is this awkward? You know, it's like, oh, you know, I guess he just abused 4 tanks in open queue, you know? So yeah, I want Ranked to just kind of get that sense of prestige back.
Yeah, I think on the title thing, it's actually quite comical because like 9 or 10 times when I see someone's title, I'm like, that's almost certainly a lie. Like whatever they're showing right now, whether it's like top 500 challenger, I'm like, that's open queue, or it's like if they're match made as the tank in the lobby, I'm like, yeah, they got that on support. Like there's no there's no way they got it on the role they're at currently. So it's like I think a simple solution to that would be you can only show the title for the thing you're queued up as, right? So if it's like if you're showing top 100 challenger, it only shows for when you're actually playing the role you got the thing on, not like you know you one tricked whatever hero to top 100 and then you're like flexing on everyone else on every other thing. So
let's go back to showing everyone's ranks.
That too. That would be a nice alternative as well, or both. Why not both?
Why not both?
Awkward. What about you, man? What's your kind of short to midterm desires?
In terms of specifics, there are too many to mention, so I'd like to address something very general. I would prefer Overwatch to address, first of all, that the feedback has been received. We're working on this, even though it might take some time. And the second thing is just more frequent changes, adapted specifically to the feedback that is given. Not, okay, Sojourn is OP, let's nerf Mercy. You know, it makes no sense. It's so a little bit more transparent, a little bit faster.
Okay, short and sweet. And on that note, Spilo.
Well, I'm not creative at all. I'll just echo what they said, basically. I think ioStux is 100% right. The matchmaking, showing rank, even the rank rewards for the end of the season. I think, especially if you're trying to get people to improve and play at the game, what we've kind of created is like the rank system has created a lot of questions about, am I losing games because I'm queued with a gold tank, or am I losing games because I'm actually just bad? And I think, like we talked about earlier, the heavy discrepancy in matchmaking right now. I know the queues are probably faster, but I think that there needs to be a little bit more nuance. I don't think pros or GMs or masters would be too unhappy if they had to wait a little bit longer, so we didn't have people 3 ranks lower than me in the lobby. I don't think that's a good experience for either player. Overall ranked matchmaking, all that needs to, I don't like the current system, period, anything about it. I think more communication from the devs in terms of what their plans are would be great. I think we have technically more communication than we've had at times in the past, but a lot of the communication feels like, oh, this is what we did, this is why we did it. And then we start, people complain, have issues, this is what we don't hear anything, don't hear anything. And then boom, and then we release another update, okay, this is why we did it. And even then they're not communicating as well. So I think more frequent communication with like what the plans are, what we're trying to do, like Awkward was saying, maybe making sure that we're prioritizing the right things. I don't know, more general stuff. But I think the game itself is fun. It's just, I think a lot of the structure, the way they approach balance, or the way they approach the competitive mode isn't great.
Yeah, I think that's one area where the devs would probably be like, man, you guys complain about everything, because like when we have long queue times, you guys complain. When we have short queue times, you guys complain. And I think that's, again, where as a dev, you have to kind of probably just go, I have to decide what the worst thing is. Like they're going to complain on both sides. I guess this has been the issue with like team queue, right? Like, because this is another issue the games always face, is if you have like a separate team queue, people will be like, oh, well, why do I have to queue up for a separate thing? I just want to play. But then if you let stacks play in your solo queue, then people get upset as well, where they're like, oh, you're punishing me, like, because I'm a solo queue and the stacks are going up against me. So it's like, whatever option you choose, someone's going to be upset. But
I think that's the lowest hanging fruit, like I said. Right? We don't. It's okay to queue with masters. but we just don't want plats. And plats should never be in the GM lobby, ever. Never. Not once, right? And we should hopefully never have a 30, 25, 20-minute queue, right? So it's like, to me, it's like the outliers are the ones that really stick in your head as a really negative experience that doesn't make you want to play anymore. So if we can, okay, I have a lot of masters in my GM's games. I can live with that, right? I can live with a 10, 12-minute queue. As you know, it's the outliers that really tick people off and make people not want to play anymore. And to me, I think that's it's like I said, it's always a sense of priorities, I think, when it comes to these kind of things.
True. I think that's pretty much, I'm sure how the devs would say as well, sums up how they have to do things. It's like priority, resource,
Right.
resource. What can we do now?
Right.
What can we push back for later?
Hey, and one more time, screw Bobby Kotick.
Yeah.
Just
middle
one more
finger to
time.
Bobby Kotick one more time.
Yeah,
One more
shame
time.
to
Fuck
that
that guy.
Yeah.
Fuck that guy. Yeah, this is when Blizzard gonna cut me off the air. So I appreciate my guests very much, guys. Thank you so much for joining me. Please go show these guys some love. If you watch this on YouTube, as I know so many of you do, or on your Spotify/podcast services. Yes, Awkward.
Can I say one last thing? I want to
Yes, my
cycle
friend.
back to the beginning of our conversation. Well, me and Spilo seem to be on the same page. ioStux was the opposition in the beginning, but it seems like ioStux, you agree with me on a lot of things that I say. You just might not agree with the way I phrased this, right? So I just want to just wanted to know where if you still disagree with what I say, or just disagree with how I say it, because these are two different things.
I still think Unranked to GM is very morally questionable, and ultimately, hurts the gameplay experience more than it helps. But I do think that your mindset overall is something that a lot of people would gain, to benefit from if they would adopt that mindset. So I'm not quite going to change my stance. I'm still against Unranked to GM. I'm still against Smurfing. But I think you have a winner's mindset, and I think just like that alone is something that people can take a lot away from. And I think there's definitely educational value in the content that you make.
And another thing that I'd like to mention is that Spilo, because you were speaking about Hadi and how he went to the gym, you seem like a person who really respects endeavors outside of these video games. You want people to not only be good at video games, but you want them to be good outside of it, which is something that I'm trying to push to all the people that are watching. In general, if you can be competent in a video game, it seems a little bit ridiculous to say, but you can be competent at other things. If you can go from, let's say, gold to plat, it means you can probably go from 10K a month to 15K a month at your job, just because you understand the process of learning. You need to improve all aspects in your life, not because we as gamers, we have a really bad rep. This guy's a nerd, this guy has no social life, this guy's that. It's very important to truly believe in yourself, and that's why I push people to be better. It seems ridiculous that I push people to be people like, oh, but you're talking about Overwatch. People spend hundreds and thousands of hours playing video games, and they're stagnant and not moving. And this is a notion that only exists in gaming. Nowhere else where you would see this kind of behavior accepted towards themselves. A person that goes to the gym for 3 years and has no results has all the right to be upset with himself. A person that is going to a boxing gym, he's been training for 3 years, and a new person comes in and smokes him, should feel bad about themselves. And if you're a person who truly wants to be better and you're stuck, you really need to rethink, look inside. What can I do better? And if you can do better in Overwatch, you can do better at other aspects in your life. And that's very, very important, because you don't want to be that guy who's just good at video games and has nothing else going for him, because you are truly, truly talented, because you understand, and truly a smart person if you can understand how to go from gold to GM, because it takes a lot of learning. It's not a skill to be underestimated.
Motivational. I might have to add some epic music in the background in the post edit of that, just when we put this up on YouTube. But yeah, it's a very nice note to leave it on, I think, and hopefully people find kind of some things here to take away that maybe make them feel more motivated or more inspired or just better about themselves. And also, I think always healthy to have a little bit of disagreement and a bit of I respect your stance, but I choose to disagree with it. And I think that's kind of why I wanted to have this podcast, because it's nice to see healthy discussions had, and I like to see people whose opinions I respect express those opinions and why they might disagree. Much better than Twitter.com. So yeah, again, like I said, thank you very much, guys, for joining me. Their socials will always be in the description of this video. So if you watch, please go show these guys some love. 3 very distinct coaching styles there as well for any of you who want to get some coaching done. Pick your poison. You know, what do you like? Although Spilo's much nicer here than he is as a coach. I promise you right now, he's going to yell at you if you actually hire him. So bear that in mind. Maybe a little bit. But yeah, thank you very much, guys. I hope you have a fantastic day. Thank you so much for joining me. And that's it from us. Peace out.